I can't figure out how, from a football standpoint, you would choose Andre Johnson over Torry Holt. Not that I don't think Andre Johnson is a Hall of Famer. Don't get this misconstrued. I think Andre Johnson is a Hall of Famer. I would have just put Torry Holt in ahead of Andre Johnson if I had that choice this year. And oh, by the way, I would have put in Reggie Wayne ahead of Andre Johnson too.
So I actually disagree with it. I would go Andre Johnson over Torry Holt. I know that's not the thing that I should say today to really endear me to our listening audience. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. That was Randy's take on Torry Holt being snubbed from the Hall of Fame. I want to make this very clear. I think Torry Holt is, will, and should be a Pro Football Hall of Famer. I just didn't think this was his year. I was surprised by how many people were certain that this was the season, this was the year in which he would get into the Hall of Fame. I think next year has a really good chance to be the year for Torry Holt. Guys, I'm going to ask you a question. When you watched the greatest show on turf, did you view Torry Holt as the number 1 or number 2 wide receiver on that team?
I'll go with number 2.
For the Super Bowl run, the definitive Super Bowl run, he was number 2.
When you think back to the greatest show on turf,
I mean,
do you think of him as the number 1 or the number 2 wide receiver?
In the most celebrated era, a close number 2.
Yeah, a number 2 receiver.
Close.
And that is what Reggie Wayne was for the Indianapolis Colts. So there is a true 1-for-1, because Reggie Wayne will be the other wide receiver that is up for it. I think one of those two will get in next year. And the way that it works is typically you're not going to get multiple receivers, unless it's obvious, right? Like if you've got, let's say, Randy Moss and Jerry Rice in the same year somehow in the pro football. It would never work. Obviously, they retired at different times. But if you had them up for the Hall of Fame at the same year, yeah, they're going to both get in on their first ballot. You're going to put 2 wide receivers in that year. But typically, they try to even these things out, where it's one wide receiver is going to get in this year. We're going to get a lineman in. This year, they put a kick returner, punt returner, Devin Hester. I was thrilled that they did it. Shocked that it happened, but thrilled that they did it. I think he is more than deserving, Devin Hester, of being in the Hall of Fame. But when you look at the way that it was this year with Torry Holt going up head-to-head against Andre Johnson, I'm sorry, guys. Again, I know this is not going to endear me to the St. Louis audience that we're talking to right now. Andre Johnson was a legit number 1 alpha wide receiver, no question about it. He played with some of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen for any receiver in the history of the NFL. I don't know how many guys would have been on those Texans teams and put up the kinds of numbers that Andre Johnson did. And so, yeah, I'm going to say that I think Andre Johnson was more deserving of getting into the Hall of Fame in this specific class than Torry Holt was. I think next year when we have the 1-for-1 comparison of Reggie Wayne versus Torry Holt, that to me is a very different discussion. Now we're on a level playing field. 2 guys that played with great quarterbacks, that played behind an all-time great wide receiver as well. Now we can have the conversation. And to me, I would go Torry Holt over Reggie Wayne, personally, when you have that kind of a comparison between the two. But when you go head-to-head, number for number, between Torry Holt and Andre Johnson, it is close, if not in favor of Andre Johnson in most of the volume statistics. And if you go by a more like traditional game-by-game, it's close enough that I would go with the guy that ended up being with the terrible quarterbacks. His job was made more difficult because of the supporting cast around him. So, T-Bone, I actually didn't have a problem with the way that this went this year. There have been times in the past where I have. This time around, I hate saying it, I think the Pro Football Hall of Fame voters actually got it right.
Yeah, I didn't have an issue with it because I think it was close, and I think you're right. I think the quarterbacks, when you look back and you say, okay, who did Torry Holt play for? And I say Kurt Warner, I go, okay, that's better than Matt Schaub, who was probably the best quarterback Andre Johnson played for, or played with, I should say. So I don't have a major issue with it. I'm looking at their stats, and I go, okay, from their age, 23 to age 31 seasons I'm looking at, they're kind of similar. Torry Holt kind of has a slight favorite, but then Johnson had a little bit more of an extended run a little bit after that as well. So I don't have an issue with it. If they would have put Torry Holt in over Andre Johnson, I wouldn't be on here saying they got it wrong either. So I don't have much of a problem with how they went about it. I do think Torry Holt, to your point on when he goes into the class next year, and we're looking at
He's
who
a
comes
deserving Hall of Famer.
I think he's a Hall of Famer next year. I think next year's his year for sure, because I think he has better candidacy than Reggie Wayne, who's going to be entering the ballot. So I have no issue with it whatsoever.
I'm not going to cry foul over it. I do think that you can make the argument, however, that Torry Holt did shine or burn brighter for a shorter period of time, a la the Terrell Davis sort of contention here, because he did have more total career touchdowns in 11 seasons. It took Andre Johnson those 14 campaigns to rack up his 71.
Now,
and
to be
winning
fair,
matters. Winning matters to me. I'm not trying to penalize Andre Johnson for not having...
We've never talked about wide receiver wins. Never once in my entire life have I been like, the wide receiver that was on the team that won is more deserving than the wide receiver that was on the... No,
in my
that's
Hall
not
of
how we
Fame
view
book,
it.
for what it's worth.
That's a quarterback thing. If you want to talk about that with quarterbacks, and we'll get to that with the Eli Manning discussion that's about to be on the full display next year, and boy, howdy, is that going to be a fun one. That one, okay, sure, we can have the conversation about. There's nothing you can do as a wide receiver to make up for the fact that I've got crap quarterback play. The guys that Andre Johnson caught passes from in his NFL career, it reads like a Greek tragedy in terms of what you're listening to when you hear the names of the quarterbacks. Ryan Fitzpatrick was the most successful NFL quarterback by a yards per attempt basis that Andre Johnson played with in his NFL career. If you're looking at the guys that he caught the most passes from, it was Matt Schaub, who was bad, and David Carr, who was a number 1 overall pick that lasted like 5 years in the NFL. That's how bad he was behind a terrible Houston Texans offensive line. So Andre Johnson, in my opinion, and I'm actually going to disagree with you a little bit on this, Bradford, as well. I think his peak was right up there with Torry Holt as well. Led the NFL in yards per game in 3 out of 4 seasons between 2007 and 2010. He did so with horrible quarterback play. So I would go Andre Johnson personally over Torry Holt. But all of this is to get to the point of next year's the year. Next year's the year where Torry Holt needs to get in, because after that, you're going to start getting even more wide receivers that are put onto the ballot. The year after, you've got Larry Fitzgerald coming onto the ballot. And then we're going to start getting into the era where you've got all of the dudes that have been playing over the last 15 years, where the numbers are just going up and up and up every single season. Those guys are going to get thrown onto the ballot here pretty soon as well. It's going to be similar to the quarterback conversations, where you've got just this glut of quarterbacks that are about to be on there. You've got Tom Brady that's going to be on there, Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning, Big Ben, like all of these different dudes are going to be on the ballots moving forward, and it's going to make it very difficult to be able to get in. So Torry Holt next year needs to get in. I think he should get in this time around. It's going to be harder for people to make the argument otherwise. But as much as last night sucked, and I get it, we've wanted him to get in for years now. We've been waiting for the moment for his name to be called. I never really felt like last night was the time where it was going to happen.
And in order for him to break through, let's say that it is next season, I think the voters need to take into consideration just how great he was in the last few seasons in St. Louis when he did not have great complementary quarterback play. Post Kurt Warner, Mark Bolger, take nothing away from him, was outstanding for several seasons. But the last 2, 3, even arguably 4 campaigns where Mark Bolger was here at the helm in St. Louis, he was shell-shocked. He was a different player. And still, you have Torry Holt going out there as the lone threat across the middle over the top, and he's still compiling 1,000-yard-plus seasons. I don't think he gets enough credit for the tail end of his career in St. Louis.
A totally fair point. Torry Holt was excellent. Torry Holt's a Hall of Fame player. Just wasn't worthy of getting in my opinion, over Andre Johnson this time around. The conversation that we're going to be having next year, though, is going to be one that it is something that speaks to my heart, because it's funny because when we talk about the Baseball Hall of Fame, T-Bone, one of the guys that I'm going to be caping for more than just about anybody is Madison Bumgarner, who has done things in the postseason that in the last 20 years, outside of like Roger Clemens, we really haven't seen done. Chris Carpenter's up there to a degree as well, but Mad Bum's runs that he had in 10, 12, and 14 were all-time great runs for a pitcher. And because of those, despite him being a slightly above league average pitcher in the regular season, I think he's going to be deserving of getting into the Hall. But I think most of the Hall voters for baseball will disagree with me. They'll probably keep him out, and it'll take him a long time if he ever gets in. But the guy that has that kind of a case in football is Eli Manning. When you look at his NFL career during the regular season, never once did he lead the league in yards. Never once did he lead the league in touchdowns. I think if you go to any individual season there's a pretty good chance at no point in his career was he a top 5 quarterback in the league. Now think about that. Never once was he an all-pro first-team player. He was a 4-time Pro Bowler, but never a first-team all-pro quarterback. And this is a guy that I genuinely believe, T-Bone, because of the 2 Super Bowls, and I can't take that away from him. 07, 2011, especially in 11 when he was really good in the postseason. 07 was more the defense, but I can't take those runs away from him. And as a result, the 2 rings, if you win 2 rings as a quarterback, you get in. It is a get out of jail free card. Whatever happened the rest of your career, if you win those 2 rings, you're getting in as a quarterback. And I think Eli Manning's going to end up as a first ballot Hall of Famer when he gets on next year.
Yeah, his case is so fascinating because you're right. Mad Bum, I would hear an argument for him to be in the Hall of Fame because I think you have to take in the full body of work, the full regular season and postseason success. And when I look at Eli Manning and I see he led the league, you said he didn't lead the league in passing yards, was never an all-pro. He did lead the league in interceptions 3 times, which is not a category you want to be leading in and turning the ball over. But you're right. I think when you look at his work in the playoffs, which honestly outside of just really the Super Bowl runs, if you took those out, which you can't do, he's 0-4 in the playoffs. Like, he didn't win in the playoffs outside of the 2 Super Bowl years. So it's so odd because, like, I think you're right. I think he's going to get in because of those 2 Super Bowls. But he only played well in the 2 runs. Otherwise, he didn't do much in the playoffs in those other years. So he's a fascinating case because I think players should be looked at for their whole body of work. I said until Kershaw got a World Series, I wasn't 100% sure he was a Hall of Famer because of the lack of postseason success, because that's the biggest stage is the postseason. Whatever you do in the regular season, man, that's fine and dandy. But if you're not winning at the biggest stage, that's where it matters to me. And you know what? Because Manning has 2 Super Bowls, I understand what the regular season numbers say. I think he probably is a Hall of Famer because he did have that success and he did get 2 Super Bowls, which not a lot of quarterbacks can say.
Somebody on the text line said, so guys, there's a guy like Pat Maroon a Hall of Famer because he won 3 straight in the NHL. Football's different, man. Quarterback position, if you get to multiple, and somebody on the text line brought up Jim Plunkett, I think he should be a Hall of Famer. If we're going to judge people this way, it shouldn't only apply to the modern era of football. Plunkett should probably get in. And I think that's something that has been wronged by the Hall of Fame voters as well. I think it is something that will eventually get righted. But I genuinely believe that the Super Bowl wins for Eli Manning will be the thing that carries him into not just getting in, but being a first ballot Hall of Famer next year. I will argue it to high hell. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. I think Phillip Rivers is more deserving. I think Big Ben is more deserving. I think Peyton, Tom Brady, Lamar, Patrick Mahomes, like I think your guy Matt Stafford is a more deserving Hall of Famer personally than Eli Manning is. But despite all of my objections, he's going to be the guy that ends up getting it.
It's really hard to ignore somebody who had over 350, even in this era, 350 career passing touchdowns. But you're right, at the end of the day, it comes down to the Lombardi trophies because in the final 8 seasons of Manning's career, only once did he lead the Giants to a 10-win season. Think about that.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy that he's going to be the guy, but whatever. He is Tanner Hendrickson. That is Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll talk this over with Michael Lombardi, former NFL general manager. I would be curious. He was with the New England Patriots in the early 2000s. What does he think of Torry Holt's case to be a Hall of Famer? We'll get to that with Michael Lombardi coming up in 15 minutes or so. We'll also get a preview from him of this year's Super Bowl. But coming up next, Torey Krug's importance to this Blues team, I believe, has increased in a significant way during this season. What does it mean for his future? What does it mean for Scott Perunovich's future here in St. Louis? That's next here on 101 ESPN.
ESPN is everywhere. Wherever you go, we go. The 101 ESPN app in your app store or Google Play. St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
All right, so Torey Krug has been a lightning rod for discussion here in St. Louis. And T-Bone, I think he's become a guy that is more important with his role to the Blues today than he was at the beginning of the season. We were all clamoring for that trade to go through with Philadelphia when it was being bandied about over the summer. And then it was Knicks, Torey Krug, contractual right, decided, hey, I don't want to move. I don't want to play for the Philadelphia Flyers. I want to be here in St. Louis. Cool, no problem, no harm, no foul. And we get into the regular season. It's like, man, I still believe that his time here in St. Louis, I believed going into the year that it was going to be limited, to say the least. I no longer feel that way. I actually feel like if you're looking at the blue line, the two guys that I'm most confident at this point will be here, at least for the next 3 seasons, are Colton Parayko and Torey Krug. And the reason I feel that way is because of some of the news that's come out over the last 24 hours. It is now a week-to-week injury that has taken place with Justin Falk, and Justin Falk has not had a good season this year. It's just, for whatever reason, he has not played up to snuff, and some of that might be injury-related. Maybe this is a part of it, but that's one piece of this. And the other is Scott Perunovich, who is still not back, and he is also week-to-week. He's expected back before Justin Falk, but this has been the big question about him for his entire career here in St. Louis. Can he actually stay healthy? The answer appears to be no. And we talked about this with JR a couple of weeks ago, T-Bone, of what is the actual contract status with Scott Perunovich? Is he going to be an RFA? Is he going to be a UFA? What is he going to have at the end of the year? JR told us the overwhelming likelihood is based on the number of games that he's played, he will be an unrestricted free agent after this season. I don't think he's going to be back. I don't think the Blues are going to or should re-sign Scott Perunovich. If that is indeed the case, it's time to say, you know what? We tried it. It didn't work. And if Perunovich is moving on, and you look at this power play unit, which has actually played really well so far under Drew Bannister, you have to have somebody that can play the point. And right now, that somebody is Torey Krug. Is he overpaid at $6.5 million per year? Yeah. Do you want to upgrade that second slot on the left side on your blue line? Absolutely, I would. But given what he brings to the table, I don't think there's an obvious candidate internally or externally to be able to bring in to replace his kind of production. Torey Krug's importance has increased more than just about anybody else other than your top line forwards this season.
Yeah, and Perunovich not becoming that guy, which was going to be tough ask for him, and really what's been his first full healthy year, quote unquote. It was going to be tough for him to kind of take that role and run with it to make kind of Torey Krug expensible. But now I think you're right. I think you've seen now that because he still cannot remain healthy, Scott Perunovich, that you have to keep Torey Krug and have to have him be a focal point of this team because of the power play. You need someone that's going to be a good puck mover on the point, and you don't really have anybody else, whether it be in the system or when I look at the roster without Scott Perunovich and say that guy could be a quarterback of a number one power play unit. So I think you're right, and I will say this. I think they may have even found a formula that works for Torey Krug. We've talked about it. Since he's been with Matthew Kessel, more of a stay-at-home defenseman, that he's played better at 5-on-5 as well. You know, that Krug and Falk pairing, maybe it was because Falk's been dealing with an injury, but that pairing as a whole had not been very good because I don't know if it's because they don't have a stay-at-home defenseman. They don't really know where each one of them is going to be at times on the ice. But since Krug's played with Kessel, that pairing has looked really good. Now, I'm not saying Kessel needs to be a top 4 defenseman for the Blues next season, but what I'm saying is I think you can make things work with Torey Krug long-term, both as the number one quarterback of the power play, but also with a stay-at-home defenseman. If you can find a stay-at-home defenseman to be on the right side with him, I think you can have what you're seeing, the success from Torey Krug this season.
Yeah, I don't have to like it. It's kind of like the conversation we just had about Torry Holt, right? Do I think Torry Holt's a Hall of Famer? I absolutely do. Do I think he should have gotten in over Andre Johnson? I don't, and I think he should get in over Reggie Wayne, and I think that'll take place next year. Do I love the fact that Torey Krug's going to be your number one power play defenseman, your point man on the power play for the foreseeable future? No, I don't necessarily love it, but do I think it is the best way to go about things moving forward? Yes, I do. I know Scott Perunovich is only, 24, 25 years old, and you'd like to see more from him, and if he had more years, more runway of making $750,000, I would be all for bringing him back. But somebody's going to buy into the hope, the belief, the expectation, the potential of what Scott Perunovich still can be. I just don't think that team's going to be the Blues. I think it's time for him to get the change of scenery that we've seen for so many others over the years that are his style of defense. Maybe he goes on to become Vince Dunn. Maybe he goes on to become Jake Wallman. I don't think that the Blues can continue to wait around to find out if that's going to happen here, for better or for worse. The Blues back in action, by the way, tomorrow, right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. It's a matinee game tomorrow, pregame coverage with Alex Ferrario, who's back in the saddle at 11 a.m. Puck drop for that one between the Blues and the Sabres tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Again, all of that right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Hey, you guys can get involved. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. We also have the Graveyard Chat going on over on YouTube, youtube.com/101ESPN-STL, alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll get to your questions for Ask Us Anything. Is a Friday. It's a very different segment than the questions and answers that we would normally do, sports or otherwise. That's coming up at 11:45. But next, Michael Lombardi is a former NFL general manager. Want to get his thoughts on Torry Holt being snubbed in the Hall of Fame voting this year, and what's he expecting in this year's Super Bowl between the 49ers and the Chiefs? We'll talk about all of that with Michael Lombardi next here on 101 ESPN.
Blues hockey is on 101 ESPN. Get the inside scoop on and off the ice with the Last Minute Blues podcast with Jamie Rivers and Donnie Fandango of 105.7 The Point. Blues opinion, talk, and speculation. It's what we do. Download the Last Minute Blues podcast on the 101 mobile app or at 101ESPN.com. It's the Super Bowl on 101 ESPN. Chiefs and 49ers. Will it be another Kelsey Swift celebration, or will Brock Purdy crash the Vegas party? Coverage gets underway this Sunday at 4. Your exclusive home for the Super Bowl is 101 ESPN. Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Let's go out to the 101 ESPN hotline. It is Super Bowl week, and we are happy to be joined by Michael Lombardi, the former NFL general manager, host of the GM Shuffle podcast, and he's got a new book out. It's called Football Done Right: Setting the Record Straight on the Coaches, Players, and History of the NFL. That is available now on Amazon or wherever books are sold. You can get a link for that on his Twitter account, @MLombardiNFL. Michael, I've been listening to you for years on the Bill Simmons podcast and your podcast as well. Thank you so much for hopping on with us today, my friend. How you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Thrilled to have you. So I want to get to some of what's in your book here in just a moment, but the big news here in St. Louis overnight, Michael, was that Torry Holt did not get into the Hall of Fame this year. What was your reaction to that news when you saw? Were you surprised to see that Torry Holt did not get in?
No, I think the whole reason I wrote the book is I think it's all broken, right? I think that the whole system is broken, and I don't think there's really a true understanding of what is a Hall of Fame receiver, what is a Hall. I mean, the fact that, that when you just break down numbers and you just look at it over time and you see the things that have happened in the league, whether it's Michael Irvin, whether it's Don Maynard, go back to Art Monk, and then you see Torry Holt not get in, you say, wait a minute, how are we comparing this to one to the other? I mean, the fact that Antonio Gates doesn't get into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. If I asked all of you the question, this simple question, is Rob Gronkowski a first-time ballot Hall of Fame tight end? Everybody would universally say yes, of course he is. Of course, Gates has 2,500 more yards than he has. Gates has 16 more touchdowns than he has. The only thing that Gronk has over him is one All-Pro as opposed to anything. So, but Gates doesn't get in. And we put Devin Hester in, who's a great player. I'm not disputing that. But you drive to the stadium on Sunday, Antonio Gates is a big problem.
He is, and Michael, I think that Antonio Gates should have gotten in. I think that I loved that Devin Hester got in. I remember watching in the mid-2000s, that guy was absolutely terrifying whenever he was back there to return punts and kicks. And I feel the same way about Torry Holt. Like, I think Torry will eventually get into the Hall of Fame. I personally didn't have a problem with Andre Johnson getting in as the receiver over him. Do you, though, when you think about Torry Holt, do you think that he is a Hall of Famer? Maybe not in this class, but in your mind, is he a future Hall of Famer?
Well, I mean, look, we put Andre Johnson just went in. He's got 70 touchdowns. Torry Holt had 74, right? When you just look at the landscape of their career, Torry Holt had 1,382 yards. Andre Johnson had 1,400. So they're very close, right? One guy had 1,062 receptions. Torry Holt had 920. But remember, Andre Johnson's playing on the team that's Andre Johnson. Torry Holt had to share the ball with another Hall of Famer named Isaac Bruce. So I think you got to take that into consideration. His numbers are spectacular, and he's ahead of a lot of receivers that have gotten into the Hall of Fame. Art Monk, Charlie Joyner, Don Maynard, Fred Biletnikoff, Andre Reed. I mean, go back to the Lynn Swann, Harold Carmichael. Tommy McDonald is in the Hall of Fame. He's got 84 touchdowns, right? He never was All-Pro first time. He was a Pro Bowler, but he was never All-Pro ever. But he had Ray Didinger arguing for him, which is great. And Ray got him in the Hall of Fame, and I think that's wonderful. But the reality of it is he's got 8,400 yards, 495 receptions. Yeah, he scored a lot of touchdowns, but, I don't understand. There's no criteria. Nobody has any answer for that.
Michael Lombardi is our guest here on 101 ESPN. Michael, I do want to ask you about this game, and I want to get your perspective as a front office executive on this game, on the way that specifically to start off the Chiefs were constructed, because you look back to what they were early on in Mahomes' career, and it was this high-flying offense with Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Sammy Watkins. They're spending all of the money on that side of the ball. And then they trade Tyreek Hill, and they've kind of repurposed a lot of their spending and their assets via the draft to the defensive side of the ball. And it's starting to feel more similar to what they did with New England, with Brady, where they had a bunch of assets going towards the defensive side of the ball, and they just believed that Brady would be able to get things done on the offense. Are you seeing some similarities in the way that the Chiefs are starting to try to build their roster compared to those Patriots teams?
Yeah, I think so. And look, Brady's first Super Bowl, he throws for 143 and they run for 142. The thing that makes Brady so great is he won different ways, right? He won in different styles and different manners. And I think this Chief team is really indicative of that. I think when you look at it, they've done a great job of changing who they are, right? So Christmas Day, Max Crosby, Malcolm Koonce, the defensive front of the Raiders creates so much problems for them. They went home, and Andy ate his turducken that day, and that didn't go down well. And when he came back to work the next day, they changed who they are. They're no longer holding the football. They're no longer trying to make explosive plays. They're going to run the ball. Pacheco's rushing attempts went from 14 per carry up to 21. I mean, that's significant. One thing we learned, Andy Reid hates calling running plays, but he hates losing more. And so he changed the team. And you got to give him credit. And Mahomes was willing to be selfless. I mean, Mahomes said, we can't win this way. We're going to figure it out. And they have. And they've won 4 in a row, counting the Chiefs, counting the Bengal game, and the 3 playoff games. And they've been very effective, and they've been winning with their defense. They've played complementary football perfectly.
Michael, when we talk about teams that get to the Super Bowl, and in any sport, when you talk about teams that get to the championship, it becomes kind of a copycat league. Teams look at those teams and say, okay, how do we build like they did? What is the one thing, whether it be from the Kansas City side or San Francisco side, that you think executives across the league will be saying, this is how we have to build to operate to get to the Super Bowl?
Look, the reality of the NFL is it's never going to change. It's time immemorial. Offensive and defensive line with a quarterback is going to win. No matter how many receivers you draft in the first round, no matter how much stuff you do, that's what's going to win games. And when you win games, it's because you have that. And Andy's done a good job of Chris Jones making an impact on their team and all the other players. And so I think, to me, that's always what they do. San Francisco puts all their resources in defensive linemen. They don't make any bones about it. That's who they want to be. That's what they're going to become. And so you win that way. The teams that spend all their money on signing receivers and drafting receivers. You look at the Atlanta Falcons. 3 years in a row, they've drafted skill positions. Kyle Pitts, right? They drafted Drake London. Last year they drafted Bijan Robinson. They've won 21 games in the last 3 years. That's not how you win football games. Now, they kept that front office in place because it had to be all Arthur Smith's fault, right? Because they couldn't score any points. We'll see how it changes.
Michael Lombardi, our guest here on 101 ESPN. Michael, kind of continuing on from that is the coaching side of things, and that's with Steve Spagnuolo, who I wanted to ask you about. I think about what he did for the Chiefs in their first Super Bowl, or in this Super Bowl run that they're on right now in the postseason, with the schematic advantage that he brings to them in the playoffs. And then I think about what he did for the Giants as well in their run against the Patriots. Michael, when you think about it, and you've got the historical database in your mind of the better defensive-minded play callers that we've seen in the last 30, 40 years, is Spags working his way up that list for you with what he's accomplishing this postseason?
Yeah, and he's doing it with different levels of player. And, I think ultimately what makes a great coach is having the ability to take what he can do and what the players can do and put it into place. And they've changed everything there. And so I think, to me, you got to give it credit for what he's done. And he's game plan specific every week, and he's done a great job.
Michael, when you look at this game heading into Sunday, what is the thing that you believe will be the biggest deciding factor either side? Every week, of course, it's turnovers. But for you, matchup-wise, what is the biggest thing that you're going to be paying attention to?
Well, the only thing that's really going to matter is if the 49ers defensive line doesn't show up, the Chiefs will win. And if the Chiefs offensive line doesn't play well, the 49ers will win. I think it's as simple as that. I know everybody loves the Mahomes. You don't want to bet against Mahomes, and that's true. However, what really is going to matter is who controls the line of scrimmage, who controls the trenches, and who wins the fourth quarter. That's football to a T.
Michael, we'll get you out of here on this. You got this book, Football Done Right, setting the record straight on the coaches, players, and the history of the NFL. For people that are considering, hey, maybe I need to go out, get a book, get something to read on Sundays when I don't have football to watch anymore, why should they be getting this one?
Well, it's really a history lesson of how we got to where we are, the coaching tree from Don Coryell in St. Louis by the tree that he learned with Sid Gilman to Bill Walsh, who represents this game perfectly in the sense that both organizations run his offense. So for me, it's a walk to how we got to where we are, what we do, how this all works out. And then we talked about the Brent Musburger, the Howard Cosell, the people who have made this game great. I think it's a kind of a lesson to all that. And then I get in the top 100 players. Talk about the coaches, too. I grade all the coaches because I don't think we have a criteria for what makes a great coach.
He's Michael Lombardi. You can hear him on the GM Shuffle podcast and, of course, get his book right now, Football Done Right. You can find the link for that at his Twitter account, at MLombardiNFL. Michael's a 3-time Super Bowl winning executive. Michael, thank you so much for the time today. We appreciate it. Enjoy yourself out there for Super Bowl week. Hopefully we'll talk with you again soon.
Thank you so much, guys.
You got it. That's Michael Lombardi joining us here on 101 ESPN. Hugely appreciate his time. T-Bone, one of the things that I wanted to hone in on there was what he said about this is going to be an offensive line versus defensive line game. The more I've been listening, consuming content all week long for people that are far smarter than what I am and understand the game at a much deeper level than I do, I actually think the side of the ball that's going to determine this is not the Chiefs' offense against the 49ers' defense. I think the Chiefs have a little bit of an advantage there, and they're going to find ways to score. I think it's the Chiefs' defensive line against the 49ers' offensive line, because the Chiefs do have some advantages there, but if there's any coach in the NFL that can find a way to schematically minimize those advantages, it's Kyle Shanahan. And an injury that took place last week that might be going a bit under the radar is the Chiefs losing Charles Omenihu, their second best defensive lineman, last week to a torn ACL, 2 weeks ago, I guess, in the AFC Championship game. He's not going to be available in this one, which means there's going to be somebody in that defensive line rotation that is taking up one step further from what they've been the vast majority of the season. That is a huge storyline going into this thing, man. If the 49ers are able to exploit that spot on the defensive line, you're going to see Christian McCaffrey running wild, and you're going to have an opportunity for them to be able to consistently move the ball.
Yeah, and when I think of like recent Super Bowl winners, I think that you look back on those teams and you say, okay, what did they have that was a big factor into the game? It was somebody that could change the game on the defensive line.
Sure.
Like, think back to when the Rams won the Super Bowl. Why did they go out and get Von Miller? So it would free up Aaron Donald more.
Yep.
So I think you're right. I think that injury, it's kind of floating under the radar because we just kind of like to look at the matchup from the 1,000-foot view and look at like Mahomes versus Brock Purdy, Kyle Shanahan versus Andy Reid. I think what Michael Lombardi said there and what you're saying is right as well is I think it comes down to which defensive line generates the most pressure, because we saw when Mahomes was under pressure in that Super Bowl against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that was a game record. You know, he was never comfortable inside the pocket. They were creating all kinds of pressure against him, and the offense never got into rhythm. That's why they lost 31-9. I'm not sure we're going to see that kind of pressure this year from the San Francisco 49ers defensive line, but I think the team that's able to get like 3 sacks probably, that's the team that's probably going to be the one that walks away with a Super Bowl victory.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. If you guys have any questions, sports or otherwise, go ahead and get them in now on the Air Comfort Service text line at 314-399-9646. You can also get those in over on the YouTube chat, The Graveyard, youtube.com/101ESPN STL is where you go to find us over there. Ask Us Anything coming up next. You're on 101 ESPN.
Kickstart your mornings with the opening drive on 101 ESPN. Get in the know first on everything St. Louis sports with Brooke Grimsley, Dan McLaughlin, and Randy Carricker. The opening drive, weekday mornings from 7 to 10 on 101 ESPN.
The opening drive is presented by Sumner One.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
Blues nearly back in the swing of things. Good morning. I'm Bradford Bruns, and this Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock, St. Louis visits Buffalo. Pre-game coverage on 101 ESPN featuring Alex Ferrario and Joe Vitale begins 1 hour earlier. It's the Notes' first contest since January the 30th. The Sabres, meanwhile, suffered a 2-1 loss to Dallas on Tuesday. Baseball two-time Cy Young Award winner Dallas Keuchel announcing his retirement. From Philadelphia, Brandon Marsh undergoing surgery on his right knee. The outfielder will reportedly miss 3 to 4 weeks. This Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers on 101 ESPN.
All right, it's time for Ask Us Anything. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. If you guys have any questions, sports or otherwise, go ahead and get them in over there. You can always watch us and chat with us over on YouTube, youtube.com/101 ESPN STL. That's where you go for the graveyard, the chat over on YouTube. All right, let's get to some of these from the 314. Guys, is this Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed's final game in a Chiefs uniform? I think it's Chris Jones' last game in Kansas City. I'd actually be pretty shocked if it's not. He's going to get $30+ million per year. His franchise tag next year, I think, is like $32 million if you were to play on that. So he will not be back in Kansas City on a 1-year deal. I'd be pretty surprised at this point if they bring him back on a multi-year contract. They don't pay guys over the age of 30. He's going to be 30 this offseason. I think L'Jarius Sneed will be back on a long-term extension, though. So that would be my guess.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I can't see Chris Jones coming back. I would be shocked if they decided to kind of let Sneed walk, though. Although, hey, I hope so, because I want to see him sign with the Rams. Rams need some help in their secondary, so I'm really hoping that he hits the free agent market and that the Rams have cap space and can go after him.
I agree with you. Sneed, a little bit younger, and in that secondary, so many talented players, as you well know, BK, but for him to be able to be out there and serve as that bedrock, that linchpin, the continuity, I think it's just irreplaceable.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Guys, what's your favorite non-sports podcast to listen to? T-Bone, do you listen to any non-sports podcasts?
I'll be honest, I don't listen to any non-sports podcasts. I honestly don't listen to a ton of podcasts, actually. So I'd much rather, like, when I go for a walk, like, listen to music rather than listen to a podcast. I'll do it. I'll listen to some of my favorite sports ones just because I'm listen and try and get some content, but I don't think I have a podcast that I listen to that's not sports related.
I like the entertainment stuff, and this shouldn't surprise many people in the audience because apparently I've produced as if it's a Broadway show on occasion. So, hey, there you
You're a
have
Broadway
it.
guy.
Not entirely, according to the text line. No.
I wasn't sure if you were like somebody that is super. Nothing wrong with that. I went to a Broadway show last fall.
I can appreciate.
I listen to The Rewatchables. It's a Ringer podcast about a bunch of movies that have been played in the past. So that's one that I go to. They also have a TV podcast that I really like. And then I listen to a bunch of political stuff that we don't have to get into here. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything from the 314. BK, did you ever accomplish anything when playing youth sports?
Wow, they just
don't know why you would ask that question. Yeah, the framing of this feels a little leading. My youth football team was quite good. Now, was I a particularly important piece to that puzzle? No. I was the most average of average high school athletes. Like that was me. I was a starter on the varsity my senior year. Before that, I was a guy that lettered, but I mean, I was like on special teams and stuff. We had a good team.
Hey, that's an important role. You can't win a football game without special teams.
Darn right.
We went to state my junior year, and I was on the punt squad.
There you go.
Big deal there.
Hopefully you didn't miss like a tackle or something.
No, so in the state championship game, we went up against Hazelwood Central.
Ooh.
And I remember being on the punt team. They were really good. This is in the midst of Hazelwood Central, like a historically great run. I think this was 2009 would have been the fall that they were, I think they had gone to 3 straight state title games at that point in time. They returned that one for a touchdown. So it could have gone better, to say the least. But yeah, I was a super mediocre athlete growing up. I played like not AAU basketball, but a travel team, basketball team, and I was like the 7th guy in the rotation. So yeah, I mean, it was exactly what you would expect.
All I'm hearing is you've played an important role. Special teams matter. You got to get production off the bench in basketball.
Third phase.
Yeah, don't sell yourself short, sir.
Yeah, I was a glue guy, so to speak.
Yeah.
All right, from
Cardinals know a lot about that.
618. Guys, with all the facts finally put out there into the open with Trevor Bauer, it seems bizarre to me. Is it to you that nobody has signed him yet, especially with guys like Marcell Ozuna and Aroldis Chapman playing without criticism? So I think there's a really key distinction between the two. Between the three, I suppose, like the two sides, Bauer versus Ozuna and Chapman. And I'm not telling you this is right or wrong, but for me personally, I think this is why you're not seeing Trevor Bauer signed and those other guys have remained in Major League Baseball. There are no pending charges against Ozuna or Chapman. I feel like this has gone, I don't know how it happened or why it's happened, but it seemingly has gone totally under the radar that Bauer is not free and clear. This is not a situation where he has had all of the loose ends completely tied up. No, there is still an ongoing procedure that is taking place against Trevor Bauer. There is one that has been cleared up. There are others, especially one that I believe is in Arizona, if I'm not mistaken, that's going to take place this year. It's expected to hit court this year. So that is a huge difference between the two. I heard the Fast Lane talking about this yesterday, and I wanted to get on the air and talk to Stalter about it, go back and forth with him on it, because he was talking about how he thinks there will be a team that goes ahead and takes the opportunity to sign him. And it'll be a team like the Pirates or somebody, right? That's not in contention. He'll sign with them, and then he'll be traded at the deadline. Bauer, if he didn't have anything else that was outstanding, if there were no more charges, I could totally see that happening. But because there's stuff that could still come out, and you don't know what it is. As a team, there is no way to possibly know what could be coming. It's just too much of a PR nightmare to deal with potentially as an organization. So you don't have to like it. I'm not telling you should, but that, I believe, is why he remains unsigned. And it's why there's zero chance that a team like the Cardinals that is super conservative, even with guys like Ozuna or Chapman, they would never consider either of them either at this point in their respective careers. I don't think that the Cardinals would ever give it a second of thought.
Yeah, and looking at to the other part of that question about Chapman and Ozuna, I just looked this up. Ozuna was not charged in his incident. The Braves would have loved to get out of that contract. In fact, I think they did explore it, but he had already been under a long-term contract, unlike Bauer, who had been charged. The Dodgers cut him, and now he's looking for a contract. And then the same is for Chapman. Chapman was not charged. He did get suspended. Same with Marcell Ozuna. And again, he was under contract. So that is where some of the difference is one, you've got Bauer still facing charges potentially, still in the court system, while you have Chapman and Ozuna that never did face charges, were suspended by Major League Baseball, and they had contracts too, to where, again, the Braves would love to get out of the Ozuna deal, but they couldn't. He got suspended, and he got suspended again for his DUI arrest back in 2021 as well.
Plus, personality-wise, come on, guys. Bauer rails against the establishment. He doesn't go quietly into the night.
That's not even that.
That makes organizations uncomfortable, and clubhouses too, by extension, if indeed that is the case.
Yeah, and based on all the reports, like, there are some guys that will really like Trevor Bauer. There are players that have come out in support of Trevor Bauer, former teammates of his. There are also many that have come out that say, yeah, I don't like the guy. Like, I really dislike Trevor Bauer. And if we're talking about the Cardinals, right, let's talk about them specifically. Set aside all of the off-field stuff for a moment, which is hard to do, but let's do it. Think about what the Cardinals offseason has been. Think about the type of person, and I'm saying that for a reason, the type of person that they have been bringing into their clubhouse, the things that they have been describing of what they're trying to add to the clubhouse this offseason. And now think about what Trevor Bauer brings for him. Again, setting aside everything away from the baseball field for a moment, which is difficult to do, he does not fit with the clubhouse culture that they've been trying to describe all offseason of what they're trying to accomplish this year. So even if it wasn't for all of the off-field stuff, he is not somebody that would fit with what they have been trying to accomplish this offseason. Right or wrong, we can disagree with it. I personally think they've gone a little too far with the clubhouse culture stuff, but that is something to take into account as well. All right, from the 618, guys, if you could make your own Major League Baseball lineup 1 through 9, Who would be a part of it?
This is a good question.
How much time do we have?
Can I tell you who I would have leading off, and I don't know if it would be a popular opinion.
Sure.
I would go Schwarber leading off.
Really?
Dude, the pop. Oh my goodness. You want to speak to T-Bone?
I would go Mookie Betts leading off personally.
Oh,
but,
I got Betts in my lineup, but I got Schwarber leading off because I want to hit you with a 40 home run guy at the top. I would have Schwarber, my DH, leading off. Acuna batting second in right. Betts batting third at second base.
Okay.
I would have Ohtani batting. Oh crap! I've already used the DH.
Yeah, suddenly everything gets a little tougher, huh?
Sorry, Tanner, I'm with you,
You know
BK.
what? Schwarber's gone. I've changed my mind already. Betts is leading off. Acuna is batting second and right. I've got Ohtani third as the DH. I would go with. Would it be odd if I said I'd take Freeman batting fourth as my first baseman?
Sure.
I think he's one of the best offensive producers in baseball currently. Catcher I would take Adley Rutschman right now. I think he's going to be one of the best catchers by the end of this season.
Good play.
He'd be in my lineup. I'm trying to think who I'd have at like third base. I don't know who
Machado?
I'd go with.
Still like Manny?
Yeah, Machado. I think he's
Jose
probably,
Ramirez?
For some reason, I like sleep on Jose Ramirez. I would take Machado. That's who I would go with. I think shortstop, I'd go Corey Seager. Left field, I'm
going Julio Rodriguez.
Oh, that's a good.
Just gonna put him in left.
Who's your center fielder then?
Corbin Carroll.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. All right, I'd go Carroll, and I would go with Rodriguez as well because those two are really good.
Mookie, Carroll, Acuna, Seager as my shortstop batting cleanup. I've got Ohtani at DH batting fifth, and then Freeman, Rutschman, Machado, and Julio Rodriguez. That'll be my lineup, 1 through 9.
Mo should go build that kind of lineup.
Yeah, let's get that team. Can we get that team here in St. Louis?
We could get away with our rotation with that kind of lineup.
And that defense. It's pretty damn good
exactly.
defense as well. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters. We'll get to some of the top storylines heading into this weekend's Super Bowl. Try to attack it from every possible direction. But coming up next, this would be a potential gut punch to you as a Cardinals fan. We'll give you one of the latest news and notes from a potential superstar free agent landing in the National League. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
We want your insight and honest opinions on the world of sports. Use the mic drop feature in the 101 ESPN app. Say it and send it to us. Now in the App Store or Google Play.
Hey, it's BK. You just couldn't pick a worse time to sell your home than right now. Sure, it's worth a small fortune, but are you going to swap that to maybe 3% interest rate and pay 7 or 8% on a new home instead? I personally wouldn't recommend doing so, and you don't have to with the Get Paid and Stay program from Hold. This is a big-time deal. What they're doing for you with the Get Paid and Stay program is that they will buy your home now at its best current value, and you get to make all the cash and continue staying in your home until those interest rates come back down, or for as long as you'd like. Totally your call. Plus, you won't have to pay the property taxes any longer. You don't have to pay the insurance, the upkeep. That is all on Hold now. They will pay those expenses for you. Learn more about Hold's Get Paid and Stay program by calling 1-855-300-9993 or visit them at truehold.com for the smarter and faster way to cash out on your home's full value without having to move. That's 1-855-300-9993 or visit truehold.com.
When selling your home, you want the most money and the least hassle. That's exactly what you get when you work with our friend and trusted realtor, Gloria Liu, with Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty.
WXOS HD1 East St. Louis, 101 ESPN is driven by Auto Centers Nissan, home of the lifetime warranty and 30-day return. This is exactly where you want to be, listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Do when one of the best teams in the National League is interested in, the guy the Cardinals should be interested in? You probably just say, you know what, that's quite the gut punch. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. T-Bone, as I was reading earlier today over on MLB.com, Mark Feinsand, who I think is one of the best MLB insiders in the country, and he doesn't just make stuff up. He's one of those guys that when he reports something, you can take it to the bank. He wrote this. The Phillies could be able to benefit from the rest of baseball refusing to spend. There's been some buzz that the Phillies are jumping in on either Snell or Jordan Montgomery. And while Dave Dombrowski said earlier in the offseason that, quote, he doesn't expect any more major moves, end quote, he did leave the door open during a recent radio interview on 94 WIP saying, quote, I can't tell you that somebody doesn't fall into your lap at some point where you say, gee, this is an opportunity that we just can't turn down, end quote. T-Bone, what do you think the reaction would be? And I am curious from all of you in the audience right now at 314-399-9646. That's the Air Comfort Service text line. Also the YouTube chat, youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. That's where you go for the graveyard, the chat over there. What would the reaction be if the Phillies were the team that ended up signing at least one of Jordan Montgomery or Blake Snell when this thing comes to an end?
I think there would be some anger and some disappointment because we've talked about it. You look at the PECOTA projections, the ZiPS projections for what the standings show, and I think everybody agrees right now that this team's probably a 85, 87 win caliber team, and they're kind of stuck in that muddy middle with basically the rest of the NL Central and kind of like the Philadelphia Phillies and the Arizona Diamondbacks. And as we've said, it just takes one move to really separate yourself and create this new second tier. Because right now, I think there's that first tier, Dodgers and Braves. And then there's, I guess we'll call it tier two. I'd say there's probably should be like an empty tier two. But there's another tier there where it's got all these muddy teams. And then you can create your own like second tier to be right below those top tier teams by signing someone like this. And if it's the Philadelphia Phillies that do it, man, it just feels like a gut punch. Because all of a sudden I look at them and would go, man, I'm not sure you can beat them in a playoff series either, because now they have a legitimate 1-2-3 punch of Wheeler, Nola, and insert Snell or Montgomery. Oh. And that would just be filthy to go up against. And you add in Ranger Suarez, who was pretty good for them in the playoffs last year as well. I think there would be disappointment. I think there'd be anger. I think it would be more so if Montgomery signed. I think there's some fans here in St. Louis that wouldn't mind if the Cardinals didn't end up with Blake Snell. But I think fans, if they see a Montgomery deal with Philadelphia and it's reasonable, say it's, 5 by 125, $25 million a year for him as a pitcher, I can see where Cardinals fans go, why couldn't we do that? We had him here. We traded him. You know you have a good relationship with him. Why would you not bring him back to be the number two? So I think there'd be frustration and some anger.
I thought all of the conjecture in Philly actually centered on whether or if Wheeler would get an extension before the start of the season, because that's something that certainly the front office would want to take care of as well. But if you think about it from the Philadelphia standpoint, guys, this organization, much like Atlanta, if you somehow lengthen the rotation specifically for the regular season that much more, where is Philadelphia right now the weakest? I would contend end, the back end of the starting rotation, because even though you do understand you're going to get some substantial offerings there from a Ranger Suarez, you're not scared by Suarez and Walker in the 3 and 4 spots, even more so than a Chris Sale at this point in his career to Atlanta. Adding somebody the likes of the ilk of a Snell or a Montgomery, it completely transforms the way you look at this rotation for Philly.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their lineup right now. Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Castellanos, Bohm, Stott, Real Muto. That's what we're talking about with the Cardinals, where we say, hey, at least I say, I should speak for myself, 1 through 7, the Cardinals can stack up against just about anybody in Major League Baseball. That's one of the other lineups that can go head-to-head against the Cardinals, and I would say, pound for pound, it's close. If you wanted to take the Phillies, I would be hard-pressed to give a sell on why you should actually be in favor of the Cardinals. I think I might, but the star power is hard to deny in that Phillies lineup. And at the bottom of their order, they've got Brandon Marsh as well in center field, who actually had a good offensive season a year ago. It seemed like everything clicked for him, and he's a lefty bat. You don't really have that in center field or at shortstop the way that they do with Brandon Marsh. So they might even have a little bit more depth lineup-wise than what you do. And they would have a better rotation than you do, like 1 for 1. Zach Wheeler versus Sonny Gray. Who would I prefer? Well, that's not a hard conversation, and I like Sonny Gray. Aaron Nola versus Miles Michaelis. I'll go with the Aaron Nola side of things, please. And then Suarez, Walker, Sanchez, or in this scenario, no Sanchez, and instead you're going with somebody like a Snell or a Montgomery there. Yeah, it's a landslide. So now they've got you at least even with the lineup. They've definitely got a better version of the rotation than you, and their bullpen came together in a serious way a year ago. Where are you better?
Yeah.
Where is your differentiating factor over that version of the Phillies?
Our clubhouse is better.
Yeah, they've got better leadership.
We got good
apparently.
vibes, baby.
Even though that team had great vibes all season long, and 2 years ago we saw in the postseason, hot damn, that they were loving all over each other, right? So it just becomes one of those things where it's like, really? That's the team? Like the team that got Bryce Harper when nobody wanted to sign him, the team that went out and said, you know what? Trey Turner's pretty good. We should go sign that guy. Yeah, we've got some internal options to play shortstop for us, but Trey Turner is awesome. Let's go ahead and do that. And then all season long, everybody in Philadelphia was like, yeah, it's the last year for Aaron Nola. And then immediately upon free agency opening, they were like, nah, Aaron Nola just going to go ahead and resign here. He's going to be a part of our future in Philadelphia as well. You asked the operative question, though, Bradford. What does this mean for somebody like a Zach Wheeler? You know what it means? Not a damn thing. Because Dave Dombrowski is their president of baseball operation, and he would just bring him back as well.
Give it up.
This is what's so frustrating, and people talk about the spend, right? I've gotten so burned out on the spending conversation. I don't care what the Cardinals' payroll is. It's right around where I think it probably should be. The problem is not the payroll. The problem is how they spend their payroll. If they, instead of signing... See here, Kyle Gibson this offseason and one of the bullpen arms that they ended up getting. If they had, instead of that, gone out and said, you know what, we're going to spend $15 million in year one on Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery, and it's going to increase over the years the way that we did with Wilson Contreras and Sonny Gray. You could make the money work. You don't want to. This is what we talked about a couple of weeks ago when we had Kylie McDaniel on the show, where he was like, hey, listen, I was talking to an MLB general manager, and it took us 20 minutes to get to the point of, yeah, you could sign this guy if you want to. You don't actually want to. And the general manager kept going back and forth with him saying, no, we can't. It is not a should we, will we? No, it's a we can't. We don't have the opportunity to do that. And he's like, no, you do. You prioritized X, Y, and Z instead. That's what the Cardinals have done. The Cardinals have prioritized other things over going out and getting the kind of pitcher that we're talking about here. Meanwhile, the Phillies are the prototypical team that says, oh, there's an opportunity out there. How often have we heard John Mozeliak say, we'll be opportunistic?
Yeah.
Well, here's an opportunity for you to go out there and get a guy that tangibly and seriously upgrades your rotation. And you seem completely unwilling to make this kind of a move.
Yeah, and the thing that is so shocking to me, and I've brought this point up before, and I've talked about it more on the position player side than I have like in the rotation side of things, but the Cardinals are so good at developing those those complementary pieces, whether it be for a rotation or a bullpen, or like look at a lot of the guys they've developed internally. They've started to develop really good bats, but like think of a Brendan Donovan, Tommy Edman. Cardinals are really good at developing those guys, and a lot of teams would love to be able to develop that guy. Instead, they have to pay $10 million for a corner outfield bat like Eddie Rosario because they can't develop a left-handed hitter like an Alec Burleson, for example. So I would think if you're the Cardinals, you would say, again, and I'm with you. I don't have an issue with the spending as a whole, per se. I have a way that it is allocated, I would look at the way they spend, and I would say, okay, if you had $50 million this offseason and you had 5 things to accomplish, 2 front-end start, or 3, let's just say 3 starters, 2 of them I would say you probably need to be ahead of Miles Michaelis, and 2 bullpen arms, I would be okay if you said, you know what, we probably can't get all 5 of those things with $50 million, but we could go into the season without a number 5 starter, and instead we get the top 2 guys in our rotation. And instead somehow they came to this conclusion of, you know what we don't need? We really don't need a number 2 starter. We could get by with a number 1 and 4 4s. We could do that. And it's just baffling to me to look at how you could come to the conclusion and go, when I look across baseball, the teams that are having success have that kind of a formula. And that's where I am. I think they do a good job of developing the complementary pieces that you need to have. There is no doubt about it. You need to have complementary pieces. Where they seem to somehow fall short is they don't develop the superstar, they don't develop the ace internally, which I don't have a problem with. If you don't do that, you got to go out and be willing to spend the money to get that, and that comes to allocating that money heavily towards that spot and come in a little bit thinner at one side, and preferably on the back end of your rotation.
Or prospects.
Again, in which division do you play? It's all relative.
I think
it's
that's
all
nonsense.
relative here, though. No,
I think that's such nonsense.
You're telling me through that lens, when viewed through that lens, it isn't relevant.
Yeah, because I think that if they were in the NL West or the NL East, they would operate the same way.
Yeah.
Why would they change? You're not going to beat the Braves or the Dodgers, so we're going for the wild card.
But seeing
the only thing that
nothing-
would change is the messaging. The messaging would go from we are trying to win the division and get 3.2 million fans in the stands and get to the playoffs and see what happens, to we're trying to get to the playoffs and see what happens with 3.2 million fans in the stands. That's it. The only tangible difference in what I just said was the division part of it. Just remove division from the words that you hear every offseason, and they would just say, we're trying to build a team that can get to the postseason, and then we'll see what happens from there. Their new way of getting into the playoffs with the same number of wins that it takes currently to win the division is to get there via the wild card. And for anybody that's going to push back on that and say, BK, it takes more to get to the wild card than it does the division. No, it doesn't. Go look at the wins from last year. Go look at the team that ended up in the National League, representing the National League in the World Series. It was the Diamondbacks. They won, 84 games last year?
Yeah.
There you go. Nothing changes with the way that they construct their roster for this division versus another division. The only thing that changes is what they're trying to accomplish, winning the division versus getting in to play in the wild card round, which, by the way, when you win the NL Central, you still have to do. You just host.
We guarantee a home
only
game.
difference.
I think it kind of reinforces the point, because in any walk of life, unless you have a crazy internal motor, if you see nothing in the way of proactive behavior around you, it leads to more stagnant behavior
I'm
on
asking
your
you
end.
the question, though, what changes? What changes? Okay, cool.
Nothing is changing.
But what I'm saying is, if you flipped the Cardinals, you said, hey, Cardinals and the Padres have switched spots. The Padres are now in the NL Central, and the Cardinals are now in the NL West. You think they're changing their way of operating? Do you honestly believe that would change anything? And I just put them in the division with the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks and the Giants. Nothing changes.
Well, the NL West is a foregone conclusion. You have one competitive team, and that's it.
Sure. And so what does that mean for the Cardinals? You
Nothing.
think they're changing?
You want to vie for a wild card? Sure. Other than that,
But they're not going to vie for the Dodgers.
Yeah.
They're never going to be that team.
the wild card.
Okay, let's switch it again. Let's say they're in the NL East instead of being in the NL Central. I'm going to flip them spots with the Marlins. Marlins now in the Central. The Cardinals are now in the NL East. So you're competing with the Braves and the Phillies and the Mets and the Nationals this upcoming year. Would the Cardinals have operated any differently this offseason? Do you honestly believe that they would have made a different move than what they did to win the division in the Central?
Wouldn't say that.
So then this argument of the Cardinals are building to win their division, it's not intellectually accurate. We're all saying it, but what they're really doing is building to win 90 games. Whether that's to win the division, to win a wild card spot, it doesn't matter what the end result is. It all ends up with them playing in the wild card round. Our real problem with the Cardinals and the way that they're building is not the division in which they play. It's not the wild card. It's that they don't try to be the best. It's that they don't try to win 100 games in a season. And if we're being totally honest, there are, 3 teams that are actually trying to do that on a year in, year out basis? Maybe you could argue 4 if you want to include Texas in this argument. It's really the Dodgers, the Braves, and the Astros.
I'd throw the Yankees in there. I think every year they try to win 100 games, but it doesn't go
You
well.
look at the team over the last few years and think that they're trying to win 100?
Yeah, because they spend big on the free agents.
Sure.
That's what I would say. If you're
So you can throw the
going
Yankees
top
in
guys there.
The Cardinals are never going to be involved in that group. Now, you can say maybe they should be, but if they do, now you're going the tanking mode. Like, if they're going to spend $230 million on 1 year, they're going to eventually have to ebb and flow because you have to get the balance sheet correct. So you're going to spend $230 million 1 year, you're going to spend $150 million the next to be eventually meeting in the middle. So, I don't know. It's something that's been on my mind lately because I've heard a lot of, but BK, they play in the Central and that's why they're not trying. No, the reason they're not trying is because they don't want to. It's the same reason that they don't sign Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery. They don't want to.
Yeah, they haven't said it publicly, but basically they're just better at the PR than what Jerry Dipoto was in Seattle. Remember Jerry Dipoto when he said, we want to win like on average 87 games. And we're like, whoa, I can't believe you just said that. That's the Cardinals, essentially. That's the Cardinals, except they frame it as we want to win the division. Everybody goes, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, win the division, that's better than just saying we want to win 87 games every year, because that's where he got in trouble.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns. Bradford, I love you. And it was actually an interesting opinion and an interesting discussion. I liked the way you framed it.
He thinks you're wrong, but he's just going to pretend.
No,
it's okay.
This is why I love sports. The stuff that we talk about doesn't actually matter. I listen to political discussions, and it's like, that stuff actually matters, depending on which side you're on. Now, some people believe one thing, some people believe another, but the end result really, really affects people's lives. The end results for this just affects our emotions more than anything else. It doesn't actually tangibly change anything in our lives. Coming up next, NFL Quick Hitters here on 101 ESPN.
It's time for another moment in Blues history.
On this date back in 2000, the Blues would win their 34th game of the season after a 4-1 winner over the Detroit Red Wings. Michael Handzus, Jamal Mayer, Scott Pellerin, and Marty Reasoner all picking up goals in this one as Roman Turek would stop 21 of 22 shots. The Blues would hold Shanahan, Yzerman, Fedorov, Holmstrom, and Pat Verbeek, all pointless in this one.
This date in Blues history was powered by Classic Air Care, making people comfortable since 1926. For all your HVAC needs, classicaircare.com.
I'm a good person. I pay my taxes, and then, right when I get my refund check, bam, car dealers want it for a down payment. Well, not this year. All you need is $29 at Frank Lita Mitsubishi in the Automotive Outlet in Bridgeton. Every vehicle, just $29 down. Get huge discounts on all remaining 2023s and acres of pre-owned.
But I'm worried about my credit.
Do you have a job?
Yes.
Got $29?
Yes.
That's all you need at Frank Lita Mitsubishi. Plus, any trades accepted. Even if you still owe thousands. Get new Eclipse Cross and Outlander SUVs with 0% financing for 60 months. All you need is $29 down. Not your entire tax refund.
Now at Frank Lita Mitsubishi.
In the Automotive Outlet in Bridgeton, yeslita.com.
Yeslita.com.
New 24 Eclipse Cross ES, 27.8, 29 down, 463 a month for 60 months at 0% APR plus tax titles qualify buyers.
Congratulations to Joshua Brink of Fairview Heights in Illinois. He was just named our 101 ESPN Blues Fan of the Week.
Submit your pick now at 101ESPN.com to be the next Fan of the Week. Taking home Blues tickets and a $50 Buffalo Wild Wings gift card. 101 ESPN's Blues Fan of the Week is brought to you by Buffalo Wild Wings, official member of This Bar Bleeds Blue, presented by Bud Light. They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters. Let's start discussing this game. Let's break this thing down, boys. 49ers versus the Chiefs. I got called out earlier today. I only want to talk about the Chiefs side of things, even though Bradford's the one from head to toe in Chiefs paraphernalia. But
it's
hey,
fan week.
You know, I'm the Chiefs guy.
Hey.
All right, let's dive into this thing. If you were Steve Spagnuolo and you've got to try to defend this 49ers offense,
oh, man.
your chess piece that you've been able to utilize to shut down the opposing team's number one receivers this year is L'Jarius Sneed, and he's been excellent in that capacity. He has put the clamps on any receivers that he goes up against. He's physical as hell. He can play inside or out. He's an excellent tackler, but he's also a piece that they use as a blitzer from time to time. Like, he's a super important part of their defense. If you're Spags, who do you line him up against? If you could have him shadow one receiver the entire game, who are you putting L'Jarius Sneed on?
So I think a lot of people would say Debo. I would actually go Brandon Ayuk because I think he's their better pass-catching wide receiver. Debo is more of the guy that when he gets in motion, he kind of gets like that running head start. It's kind of like what the Rams like to do with Kupp a lot, where it is he goes in motion and then takes off. Kind of the same with Tyreek Hill. Goes in motion, gets that running head start, and then they try and get him in space to try and get those extra yards. I feel like Ayuk's the guy that can really burn you down the field, and that if that's the case for the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't want to get beat because of a deep throw to Ayuk, where it, like in the Lions game where they tried it, they got lucky, banked off the face mask of a lion. I would say Brandon Ayuk is the guy that I would want him covering.
Totally see your point. Having said that, I want Samuel removed from this equation. And what gives me the best opportunity to have that happen, it is by being Sneed, or having Sneed rather, as the guy who is spying him, neutralizing, trying in any way to be able to throw him off. Because I think a couple of days ago, guys, on the show, BK, you were talking about how in this sort of instance, this sort of game too, you understand that McCaffrey is going to be the bell cow back. We get that. But at the same time, what if Samuel were to pop off with a few carries coming out of the backfield? What if he were to take an intermediate route, turn it all the way up the field? You have to get him out of the mix because, with all due respect to Ayuk, he's not the same game breaker that Debo Samuel is.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to disagree with you. And
but you're wrong.
No, I'm not even saying you're. I don't know that there's a right answer.
That's
here.
what I was going to say. I hear it for both.
I think that the likely decision that they're going to make is we're going to switch things up. There's going to be one drive where he's exclusively on Ayuk. The next drive, you're going to think that you've got this figured out, Kyle Shanahan. Watch this. We're going to put L'Jarius Sneed on Debo Samuel now. Then the next drive, they might say, you know what? We're actually going to do neither of those two things. We're going to have L'Jarius Sneed lining up across from George Kittle.
Sure.
And we're going to have him as just an extra linebacker in the box to give us an extra really good tackler on this drive. And then they might switch it up consistently. So that way, you just never know if you're Kyle Shanahan where Sneed's going to be. Now, that being said, the reason why I would go with him on Ayuk as well is because of all of the motion that they do with Debo. I think you made a really good point on that, T-Bone. The best ability that L'Jarius Sneed has is in press, tight man coverage. You guys all saw the videos of him against Tyreek Hill in that wild card game. Yeah. He literally threw him to the ground. He was so physical at the point of attack that Tyreek Hill had no chance of even getting into his route. Now, that was on a frozen field. I understand that. But it drove home the point of what Sneed is so excellent at. And when you have a guy that is lined up off the line of scrimmage, as Debo is the vast majority of the game, it becomes really difficult to be able to play that kind of tight press man coverage against him. So I think I would go with him the majority of the game against Ayuk, but I wish I could have him against Debo. I wish that the 49ers had a stupid offensive staff that didn't move Debo Samuel around as much as they do, but they do, and that makes it really, really difficult to be able to take care of him.
Did you say George Kittle, by the way? Maybe just a flash here and there?
Yeah.
Account for him?
He's got to stop those 4 catches, right?
The other thing that I wanted to get to, who's the 49ers player in this game most likely to reach 120 yards from scrimmage in your mind? Is it as simple as it's definitely Christian McCaffrey, no doubt about it? He's the guy, or do you guys think there's another player that's more likely to get to 120 yards from scrimmage?
I mean, I think you're right. In the easy answer is probably McCaffrey, but I feel like the Chiefs can slow him down enough in the run game to where, like, say he rushes for 70 yards. And then you're looking at him having to get, 50 yards in pass catching? And look, he could totally do that. I could totally see that. I actually think I would say Deebo Samuel because of what we're saying, getting him in motion, trying to get him the ball in space and see if they can make something happen that way. Because if they go, and at least the way I'm thinking, and we were kind of thinking the same way of if Snead is going to lock down, Ayuk could kind of take away more of that deep threat. So now you got to kind of dink and dunk down the field. And what are they going to want to do? They'll want to go McCaffrey. But I think you see a lot of Deebo Samuel. I would take him for the 120.
Stealth-like, I think, in a couple of instances, honestly, Kansas City's aggressiveness may work against it in the sense that McCaffrey could pop off for a screen or two. We saw that in the Green Bay game as well. You can't take away that element. Still him.
Yeah, I would still go with him as well. His over-under for rushing yards in this game is at 89.5.
That is enticing.
Vegas is suggesting that they really think this is going to be a big Christian McCaffrey game. I've been listening to a few podcasts on this, and I think that the game is going to play out, not where it's boring necessarily, but I think you're going to get a lot of 8, 9, 10 play drives, and that lends itself to a lot of Christian McCaffrey on the ground, where it's 1st and 10, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2. Christian McCaffrey extends the drive, and then you keep going from there. I think you're going to get a lot of those kinds of drives, and when you have that, it's going to be fewer possessions and more yards available there for Christian McCaffrey.
I'm fascinated to know how the 49ers are going to go because with all their weapons, I would think like explosive plays, try to get down the field quickly. But, like, you don't want to get the ball to Patrick Mahomes. Like, every time I feel like we talk about a playoff game with Patrick Mahomes, what do we always talk about? It's not about how does our offense hold up with him. No, it's, hey, how do you keep the ball out of Mahomes' hands? Well, you keep the offense on the field for a really long time. I expect Kansas City to have a lot of those long drives because they don't have the better weapons offensively. Mahomes, as we saw in the game against Baltimore, he just picks you apart. He'll take whatever you give him. If you give him a 50-yard throw down the field, he'll take it. But for the most part, he's just going to dink, dunk, work your way down the field. Next thing you know, it's 13 plays, and by the way, they've got 7 points on the board. For the 49ers, I wonder how they're going to approach it. Are they going to try and be this explosive offense, or are they going to slow things down to try and keep him off the field?
Tanner, I'm glad you mentioned that because, BK, it struck me actually yesterday. I was curious. I'm thinking about the way in which we understand that defense for San Fran, it has been burned repeatedly early in these playoff games, and yet Kansas City has been so deliberate, so methodical, and patient on offense. In any way, we know that Reed is the best script guy out there, but given just how susceptible the Niners have been early in games, in any way, are you perhaps a little less patient and maybe taking a shot or two over the top early on?
So as we continue along here with NFL quick hitters, I want to get to a couple of prop bets with you guys. Who would you take as the first touchdown scorer in this game? Christian McCaffrey's the favorite. He's at plus 150. Pacheco at plus 250, and then it continues from there. Travis Kelce, I'm surprised that these are the odds at plus 350.
I was surprised. I would go Kelce. I'm shocked that he's third there. I was either thinking Pacheco or Kelce was who I would say, and because I heard the odds, I'm going to go Kelce because I like more value.
I like Deebo at 5-1. Deebo at 5-1 is really enticing. Get something going with him in the backfield, maybe at or near the goal line. Put him on a sweep. Take advantage of the Chiefs' defensive ends. I would probably go Deebo at 5-1.
I'm curious your thoughts on this because when I see a team like San Francisco and I go, man, their weapons are incredible, I have such a tough time trying to figure out how to bet for them. Because
it's really hard.
I can see a scenario where it's like, man, I could see Deebo, this 120 yards question that you presented. I could see Deebo hitting his over. I could also see him missing his over by a lot because they don't give him the ball because they have so many choices.
It's really tough, man. Like, as I look at this 49ers assembly of talent, I mean, like, greatest show on turf, obviously, you look at all of the Hall of Famers or future Hall of Famers in the place of Torry Holt, for example, who will get in eventually. Unbelievable offense. Unbelievable. They didn't necessarily have the tight end, right? And so that's what makes this 49ers so unique is you have the two wide receivers, an all-time great running back who was like this era's version of LaDainian Tomlinson or Marshall Faulk. Like, he is the evolution of those two guys. And you've got a tight end. And, oh, by the way, it's all paired. It's all put together. The orchestrator of it all is arguably the greatest offensive mind of this generation. Like, the guy that started Deshaun McVay and LaFleur, like all of these other branches of the McVay quote-unquote tree, it all started with Shanahan. All of those guys, for the most part, were together in Washington, and the one that was actually the OC was Kyle Shanahan, who was working under his dad at the time with Mike Shanahan. So it is a special collection of talent, and this is why when I say I'm super confident in the Chiefs, the thing that makes me nervous is the 49ers weapons. Those guys are amazing, and I don't want to undersell just how good both they've been all season long and for their entire careers. You know, it's a really impressive group.
I will say that those Rams tight ends during that era, they were extremely underrated, especially inside of the goal line territory, because not only did you have to account for Ernie Conwell, they had guys like Roland Williams and even Jeff Robinson, really role players for whom you had to account seriously. But I'm with you, the talent across the board, absolutely, absolutely.
Weren't you the one yesterday telling me about George Kittle?
No, I've got to protect the St. Louis house. For come on, greatest show on turf. Come on. I was here, BK.
You two, man. You'll never get along.
Ernie Conwell.
Don't sleep on Ernie Conwell, man. Above average NFL tight end. Come on.
Now look, I'm going to show my age here. I'm going to show my youthfulness here.
We're comparing the greatest show on turf with Ernie Conwell.
No. Hey.
Or Roland Williams, who had 200 yards.
Hey. They were more than representative tight ends.
Totally.
I'm not putting them in the same class.
The position has totally changed.
Absolutely.
I want to be fair there, because like at the time it was rare that you saw a tight end that actually mattered in the passing game at all. That was right before the Antonio Gates, Tony Gonzalez, like Shannon Sharp had just started really kind of coming onto the scene. It was rare that you saw pass catching tight ends. So I'm mostly just giving you trouble.
And Mike Martz schemed those guys open.
100%.
Remind you of anyone?
2-1-10 makes a good point, you know. Would you rather have the quarterback compared to over the tight end?
Oh, totally, yes.
Like you think they didn't have a tight end, but man, they had Kurt Warner.
The 49ers are not the greatest show on turf. Maybe I should say this up front. When I'm comparing them, and I'm saying and also I don't think Marshall Faulk. I think Marshall Faulk was better than Christian McCaffrey. I think when you look at the receivers, like Isaac Bruce or Torry Holt, whoever you take as the number one, the number two guy is better than what Brandon Ayuk is right now. I think I would take all of those over what the 49ers have. The thing that I'm saying is the quantity of it, the way that they can utilize these guys anywhere. Like you could put Christian McCaffrey in the slot. You could put Deebo Samuel at running back. You can move Kyle Juszczyk out wide at fullback, put him at tight end, put him in the wing position. You can use George Kittle in line or out wide. The versatility is probably, maybe that's a better way to put it. The versatility is what's different, and the number of weapons that they have is what's different. The quality of them, that's the greatest show on turf, and that's what will never be matched probably again in the history of football. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we're going to dive into the junk drawer, but next, T-Bone brought up something interesting earlier about the St. Louis Cardinals. Are they ignoring a potential problem for them in center field? We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
We've got your chance to win a pair of passes to the 2024 State Farm Missouri Valley Conference Men's Basketball Tournament, hitting the court at Enterprise Center March 7th through March 10th. March begins here with the Arch Madness of the annual MVC Tournament, celebrating 30 years at Enterprise Center. All session and single session tickets are on sale now. Get all the details and get entered to win those free tickets for Arch Madness right now, either at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app. at Decor Interiors and Jewelry.
You can now watch 101 ESPN live on our Air Alliance Team Studio Cams. Catch every show live on our YouTube channel or at 101ESPN.com. 101 ESPN Studio Cams.
Presented by the Air Alliance Team Heating and Cooling. Getting the job done quickly, correctly, 100% of the time.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
Blues to battle Sabres shortly. Good afternoon. I'm Bradford Bruns, and this Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. About 23 hours from now, the Note will be back in action. For the first time since last Tuesday, St. Louis hits the ice. Buffalo is the opponent at KeyBank Center. The Blues currently occupying fourth place in the Central Division, along with Nashville. Hoops, college style. Number 10 Illinois takes on Michigan State tomorrow as well. SLU, coming off of its victory versus Fordham, has a morning meeting with St. Joseph's, and Mizzou draws Mississippi State later in the evening. This Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
We've spent a lot of time this offseason talking about the Cardinals' potential issues, whether it's the bullpen, really the starting rotation for the most part. And some have brought up, the lineup and their lack of hitting with runners in scoring position. All, I believe, fair things to bring up as potential issues facing them in 2024. But T-Bone, you brought up something earlier this morning that concerns you a bit. And it's a potential issue that you don't think that the Cardinals have addressed.
Yeah, so I was reading our Cardinals insider Katie's Wu's piece on The Athletic, and if you haven't read it yet, I'd recommend checking it out. And it was questions coming into spring training. And I said at the forefront of the offseason, I felt like it was a want, not a need, but I wanted to see the Cardinals go after I don't want to say an actual center fielder. A center fielder with an arm that played good defense, which Tommy Edman doesn't have the arm or a wrist at this point. I wanted to see them go after a Harrison Bader. Now, the reason I bring that up is because I've always assumed since the end of the season last year that, you know what, Mason Wynn is the shortstop no matter what going into opening day. But as we keep getting closer to spring training, and I keep seeing people write that the Cardinals really want to see his bat at least show some capability here at the major league level for him to be here. And if he doesn't hit in spring training, for example, then maybe he has to start in AAA, to continue to develop the bat. You then slide Tommy Edman from center into short, and you move Dylan Carlson into center field. And my response to that is, they did not prepare well enough for the possibility of Mason Wynn's bat not being ready and them having to send him down. And the reason I say that is because then they don't have a center fielder on the roster if Tommy Edman has to slide to shortstop. Because they tried Dylan Carlson in center field last year. They tried Lars Nootbaar in center field last year. They tried Tyler O'Neill in center field last year. And you know what they determined after all those trials? None of those guys were center fielders. And a big issue that they've talked about outside of their pitching not giving them innings last year was that the defense was bad in the outfield, and that had a very negative effect on the St. Louis Cardinals, which totally agree with. I'm not even going to try and sell you on their outfield defense was good last year. It was terrible. But a big reason for that is because they weren't getting the balls in the air. They didn't have really a center fielder that could kind of close down the gaps until Tommy Edman got out there. So to go into this season and even have the possibility, if you will, that they have to pull Edman into the shortstop situation, and then you have to go right back to Dylan Carlson in center field, who, as I just said, I feel like we've all determined is not a center fielder, and that's not a bad thing. It's okay to be a corner outfielder. Lars Nootbaar, corner outfielder. Jordan Walker, corner outfielder. Dylan Carlson, corner outfielder. All of a sudden, there's this giant Jenga piece that has kind of come out from underneath the Cardinals of you're back to having a bad potential outfield defense and not having a center fielder that can roam out there and cut down these gaps in between right and left and help you out when the ball is hit into the air. If you were going to go into this season with any thought, like a 5% chance that you thought that Mason Wynn would be starting the season in AAA, you should have gone out and signed someone like a Michael A. Taylor, for example, that is a really good defensive center fielder that could come in, is going to serve the same role as Tommy Edman, to where he's not expected to hit much offensively, probably going to be below league average, but you know what? He's going to be really good and elite in center field. And to me, they just kind of overlooked that. It was kind of like, when, if it doesn't happen, we kind of pull Tommy Edman into short. And you know what? If our outfield defense is bad, it's bad again. It feels like something that should have been talked about. It should have been something that was brought up. And if you're going to have that possibility, have a center fielder that's actually on the roster that could go out there and play if you had to pull Edman into shortstop.
So the starting point for this was the Mason Wynn conversation, right?
Yes.
And that's why I think that we're just all making too much collectively about the Mason Wynn conversation. I don't think there is one. I think the Cardinals are trying to sell that there's competition going into spring and that they need to see something from Mason Wynn, and that's the carrot at the front end for Mason Wynn. They want him to have a really great offseason and to come in ready to go to compete for a job on opening day in spring training. The reality is something, in my opinion, that's much different. I think they have shown you with their actions. This is why I always say, listen to their actions, not their words. Their actions show you they're committed to Mason Wynn as their everyday starting shortstop for the foreseeable future. There is no backup plan. Their backup plan is we got to move Tommy Edman to shortstop, put Dylan Carlson in center fields, and then we don't really have a fourth outfielder that we like, and then the depth in our outfield, once again, is going to be tested. Their answer in center field is Tommy Edman. Their answer at shortstop is Mason Wynn. And that is where I fall going into the season, and I think it's where they fall going into the season. I don't think they have the questions that others do about Mason Wynn. I think they're looking at this and saying, yeah, if he hits 200, so be it. He's going to bat ninth in our lineup. He's going to be a potential Gold Glover at shortstop, and we're going to live with all of the potential issues that take place with him as he is having the adjustment period at the major league level. So I don't really have any concerns about this because I don't think the Cardinals have concerns about it, and I don't think they're wrong in that. I think that when you look at their lineup, the way that it's constructed right now, they've got options available for them all over the diamond, and I think they're pretty good for the most part this year. And it's not as you're not giving as much up defensively as what you had to last year. Going into opening day, their answer in center field last year was Tyler O'Neill. Think about that for a second. Their opening day lineup, they wanted Tyler O'Neill to be their center fielder because he wanted to be their center fielder. And they said, you know what? Okay, let's try it. If that's the carrot that we need for you, then that's what we'll go with. I don't view this as much of a problem at all for them, if I'm being totally candid.
I don't know if it will become a problem, but I hope that they're willing to say that if they go this route of Mason Wynn, that if he is going to hit 200, struggle offensively, and can really bring a great glove to be a Gold Glove caliber shortstop, are they going to be willing to do this? Because this is the kind of thing that if you go about this and he really struggles offensively and is still probably needing seasoning offensively, that can really set him back in his development. If you understand what I'm saying, because we've seen where they've talked a lot about okay, we've got a player here, but he really needs to continue his development. So though he could have a role on the major league team, let's send him down to AAA to where he can get those plate appearances and kind of really round out his game. by doing this, and I don't even think I'm not saying that it would happen, but it definitely is a possibility to think about. If you allow Mason Wynn to struggle offensively at the plate, it could be one of those where all of a sudden you start looking at it going, okay, maybe he never does develop into that guy, being a guy that can play well.
Honest? I'd be fine with it.
I would be too, but I hope that they can. I hope that the Cardinals would be okay with that.
They have to treat him the way they treated Yadier Molina. Now, I want to say on the front end, because this is the way that it always goes, I'm not comparing him to Yadier Molina. He's not going to be probably a future Hall of Famer. I don't think he's going to go down as it is the rest of the lineup's job to be able to produce the runs on a regular basis. I would look at Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt and Jordan Walker and Lars Nootbaar and Brendan Donovan and Nolan Gorman and Wilson Contreras and Ivan Herrera, all these different guys that we're counting on to hit pretty well this season for the Cardinals. It's your job to make it possible for me to not care at all about what they're getting production-wise from two guys. It's really Tommy Edman and it's Mason Wynn. Now, Tommy Edman's going to be a roughly league average hitter. And in some seasons, that would have been a problem for the Cardinals because of what they had around him. This year, it shouldn't be. And the same thing is true for Mason Wynn. Even if that dude hits 210 this year with no power whatsoever, if he's getting on base around 30% of the time, I'm fine with it, dude, just because of what he brings for you defensively. That's where his real value comes in.
Yeah, and I hope that's how they approach it. My fear, though, is like we've talked about this before. What happens if they do get off to a slow start as a team? Not just Mason Wynn. And all of a sudden you start to kind of see some pressing from the St. Louis Cardinals. And maybe all of a sudden it is, oh, no, Ollie Marmol fears for his job a little bit, job security. Maybe he has to pluck a Mason Wynn from the lineup. They don't have a clear plan B until Victor Scott is ready. And that's why I 100% agree with what you're saying of they should just stick with Mason Wynn. Harrison Bader, who just did the interview with Xavier Scruggs on his show on YouTube, he said early on in his career in St. Louis, he knew what his role was, and that was to be a great defensive player.
By the way, somebody on our YouTube chat just brought up something about Mason Wynn.
Yeah.
Do you know his middle name is Blaze? Blaze. I've never been more confident that Mason Wynn is going to be an excellent baseball player in the big leagues.
That's what made you believe in.
When Mason Wynn was born and his mother said, I want his middle name to be Blaze, she knew he was a future big leaguer.
You used the word swagger a couple of days ago, right?
That's
apropos.
Mason Wynn. Yeah. When your middle name is Blaze, there's only a couple of different ways that your life is going to go. And it went a good route for Mason Wynn. Let's put it that way. All right, coming up next, we're going to dive into the juncture here on 101 ESPN.
This Sunday, it's the Super Bowl on 101 ESPN. Chiefs and 49ers. Will it be another Kelsey Swift celebration, or will Brock Purdy crash the Vegas party? Coverage gets underway this Sunday at 4. Your exclusive home for the Super Bowl is 101 ESPN. right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Brought to you by Fenton Bar and Grill. Best trust wings in Missouri. Dine in, carry out, 7 days a week.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Browns, I'm Brandon Kiley. We got some news to pass along from college football. When you're right, you're right. All right, guys? When you're right, you're right. I just want to say that on the front end. So there's some news in college football. Chip Kelly is leaving the UCLA job. You might be thinking to yourself, well, yeah, obviously, BK wants to get out of college football. He hates it in college sports.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to be a part of this anymore. Didn't we tell you?
Seahawks OC.
Nobody wants to be a part of college when you've got the NIL, the transfers. Man, it's hard. This is a difficult job. You know what job he's taking, T-Bone?
It's got to be the Seahawks offensive coordinator job. They're still looking for a guy.
Do it again.
Go ahead. Let's hear it one more time.
Fly. Oh, that's the wrong team.
That's the Eagles. He already took that one. It didn't go well. He got fired.
Yeah. Well, he's not welcome back.
Chip Kelly is expected to become the new offensive coordinator at Ohio State.
Oh. Wait, I thought he wanted out of college football.
Whoa. This is what I was saying, man. He's trying to find an exit ramp. He was going to get fired at UCLA. He doesn't want to be there to have a disastrous season as the head coach at UCLA when they're going to the Big Ten, and he knows, man, we're going to get our butts whipped all season long, up and down the Midwest, Ohio State, Michigan, all these different teams. You want to do that? Or do you want to spend the season at Ohio State doing the butt whipping against your former team in UCLA? Yeah, give me the latter. This is amazing. Absolutely incredible. Chip Kelly never had I've got to get to the NFL aspiration. He had I got to get away from UCLA situation. We call this the Frank Haith, ladies and gentlemen. Frank Haith was the head coach at Missouri. He knew his butt was getting fired. And so what did he do? He took the job at Tulsa.
You bet he did.
Let me cash them checks. I'm going to go ahead and leave. You don't have to fire me. It's cool. You don't have to fire me. I'm going to quit. And I'm going to go take this job at Tulsa.
Faith and Haith.
When you told me going into the commercial break, like right as we hit that recent commercial break, you said, according to a report, Chip Kelly's told his team that he's
amazing.
Going to be leaving for another job. And we both assumed like the NFL route. And then I said, wait, wouldn't it be funny? Because who was it? It's the Alabama head coach now he went lower levels. Like he took the South Alabama head coach and was like, hey, you want to come be my defensive coordinator? I said, well, wouldn't it be funny if he decided to go to Ohio State? This is cherry on top, chef's kiss, and it's funny because then they just had Bill O'Brien.
Yep.
That era ended in a week, and he's back at Boston College. Now Chip Kelly's here at Ohio State. The college football carousel coaching's been fantastic this offseason.
By the way, I think he'll be great
Devin
there.
Brown?
I think he'll
do
awesome.
fantastic there with Ohio State.
I think he's going to be really good there. I think Ohio State has a chance to be excellent.
And you know what? I'm going to make a bold prediction already.
Okay,
Ohio State is going to win the big game this year against Michigan. Do you see who they named their defensive coordinator?
Michigan and Wink Martindale?
Yeah. Man,
I like that hire.
Really? But we talked about NFL coaches bringing defenses to the college game and not working. He's that guy. I don't think
the same defense, though. They were already running the mentor defense. The guys that they had hired the last two different cycles were their defensive coordinators. They both came from Baltimore. So, and then this is the Baltimore system that they both came from. So I actually kind of like the hire.
Nah, I'm out. I am out. That is not going to work. Ohio State is winning the big game this year.
All right, coming up next, we're going to talk to my buddy, Jeff Parles. He hosts a sports book conversation over at the South Point in Las Vegas. Want to get his thoughts on some of the just absolutely insane props that I'm sure he's going to be betting on this year's Super Bowl. We'll get his thoughts on the game as well, and I'm sure he'll tell you why I'm a terrible human being. Jeff Parles next year on 101 ESPN.
Text us anytime at 314-399-9646 on the Air Comfort Service Heating, Cooling, and Insulation text line on 101 ESPN. where St. Louis gets its sports. WXOS, WXOS HD1 East St. Louis, 101 ESPN. This is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
All right, it's time to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline. My buddy Jeff Parles is on the other line. You can hear him on Sports by the Book with the South Point out in Las Vegas. You can follow him on Twitter at Jeff Parles, Parles. Jeff, what's going on, man? How you doing today?
BK, it's always a pleasure. It's been a heck of a week here in Vegas. That's all I can tell you. It's everywhere you look. It's a big time NFL player just wandering around the strip. Raj at the Win the other day. It's been a heck of a whirlwind.
Have you played blackjack next to anybody? Last time I was in Vegas with you, we were right next to Terrell Owens as he was sitting down playing blackjack. Have you seen anybody at the tables?
You know what? Actually, yeah. Well, yes, I have. Here's the problem, BK. For us in media, we don't make the money that the NFL players. So the problem is on the Strip, especially Center Strip, the elite properties, the Bellagio, Cosmo. We're looking at $50, $100 minimums right now.
Sure.
It's only going to get worse. I was down on Fremont Street at Circa, and we were playing craps with the guys from the Levitard show. Unfortunately, Stu Gatz was not there, which was what I was rooting for, in all honesty.
Sure. And did you guys lose all of your money, I would assume?
I was very disciplined. I only lost I only lost like $10 on that table.
There you go.
In all honesty.
That's a win.
Yeah.
All right. Jeff Parles joining us. He's out in Las Vegas where the Super Bowl is being played. 49ers versus the Chiefs on Sunday. All right, Jeff, your favorite bet going into this game is what?
Oh, I love that you started with this because I know because obviously you're a big Chiefs guy, BK. How about MVS? My biggest bet right now was MVS over 19.5 receiving yards. It's now been bet up to 20.5. So other people seem to like it, which honestly scares me so much that has been bet up. We know the inconsistencies. We know the dropsies for MVS. We know that has been the case for the majority of his career. But you know this as well as I do. The guy is probably good for one big play. And at a number that low, all I need is one big play for 25 yards. He can do nothing the rest of the game, and I'm good. So I like that. And then the other one that's always fun, we want some plus money. I took over 2.5 players to attempt a pass at plus 150.
Of course.
Here's the deal. Obviously, if we had an injury, we don't want that, but that would get it there. But remember Christian McCaffrey in that Week 17 game 2 years ago threw a touchdown pass against the Rams. So we know Kyle Shanahan has a reputation for being very conservative in big games, but McCaffrey, as we know, is capable of throwing passes. On the Chiefs side, we know Kelsey's capable of throwing a pass. We know Noah Gray is capable of throwing a pass. So it's the last game of the year. There's no reason to hold anything back. I'm a little bit surprised that it actually the over has been bet up from plus 140 to plus 150, so people are taking that under. Just too much can happen in a game like this. Just attempt, not complete. That'd be a totally different bet on the completion, but to attempt, I like that a whole lot, BK.
Jeff, Tanner Hendrickson here. Me and BK were talking about this game earlier, and I told him when I look at the San Francisco 49ers and their player props, I have such a tough time picking out what player prop to bet on with San Francisco because they have so many weapons. What San Francisco player props on offense do you really like in this one?
You know, I'm kind of in the same boat. I don't really know what to do as much on the Niners side as I was on KC's side because when you have the amount of those weapons, we could get the classic big-time Christian McCaffrey game and all those goes over. It wouldn't shock me. Debo could have a huge game, as we know. To me, even though McCaffrey won Offensive Player of the Year last night, I still think Debo, for that team's success, is the most important guy to have healthy. Ayuk obviously had a huge game in the NFC Championship game. But you know the guy who a lot of sharp bettors that I know are attacking, and I know you both will love this, is Kyle Juszczyk, which is just wild to me. Of course, Juszczyk scored a touchdown and when these teams played back in Miami in February 2020. But Juszczyk's anytime touchdown number has been bet down from 10-1 to 8-1 at our shop. The first touchdown of the game score has been bet down. His over receptions have been bet up. Again, it's only a half, but still, his receiving yards has been bet up. Again, in the single digits.
People are bored. Jeff, they're bored. That's what this is. People are bored. We're getting too close to the game. Again, it's taking too long. That's all it is.
They love the Jews for whatever reason. So, again, I'm not in that camp. The only Niner-related prop that I really bet, the way that I have the game flow going is I think the Niners are going to be coming from behind. So I bet Purdy over completions at 20.5. And I bet it over attempts at 30.5. I know that's probably a bad sign for the Niners if he's throwing 31 passes, but I have the Chiefs getting out early and basically holding the lead the whole way here. So I like Purdy over on those. Obviously, I can get a totally different game flow and get wrecked on that, but that's the one that stood out the most to me, just the passing attempts over and the completions over for Brock.
Jeff Parles is our guest here on 101 ESPN. You can hear him on Sports by the Book with the South Point out in Las Vegas. He's on Twitter at Jeff Parles, Parles. That's where you can find all of his links over there as well. Jeff, you've talked with a lot of people out there, whether it be players, media, whomever, with interviews this week or just talking to them around the strip, whatever. What do you think is the vibe from people that you're getting on how they feel about this game? Do you get the sense that people are leaning one way or the other? Do you feel like there's a significant edge? How do you feel like the general consensus is taking place out there in Vegas this week?
You know, the funny thing is, BK, I think you probably could guess what the general consensus is. It's hard to pick against Patrick Mahomes as an underdog. I mean, that's really what it comes down to more than anything, where we saw last year in the Super Bowl. They were a dog in that game. They win. The last 2 weeks, obviously, dog in Buffalo. Everyone, the whole narrative, they never played a road game. Who cares? They go there, win. And then the game against Baltimore, they didn't score in the second half because they didn't have to do anything. So that's really the vibe more than anything on this game is that, most people I talk to are like, how can I pass up Mahomes as an underdog? And, yeah, there are a few people that I know that like the Niners. Just in the end, though, I think I'm with what most of the sentiment is here, where Patrick Mahomes is an underdog. And, look, you and I talk a ton, BK, off the air, as we know. And look, you and most Chief fans just despise this team all year, and here they are with the best defense they've had in the Mahomes era. And Patrick Mahomes looks like Patrick Mahomes again in these playoff games. So that's really just the way that a lot of people around town are thinking as well.
Jeff, is there someone outside of the quarterbacks in Mahomes and Brock Purdy that you look at and say, man, I kind of like their odds for Super Bowl MVP?
Good question. It's very hard to win Super Bowl MVP as a non-quarterback unless if we get like that horrible game we got with the Rams and the Patriots. That was the 2018 season of the 2019 Super Bowl. Obviously, only one touchdown in the game. The Rams were terrible on offense, as you guys know well. Look, I have a 60-1 on Debo from before the NFC title game was even completed because I just thought the number was going to come in at 30-1 by the time the game rolled around. That's where he's at, so that was a good handicap. But it's going to be hard. I mean, look, on the one thing is, on the Niners side, I'm going to basically contradict myself like this, but when you have that many skill position players that have made an impact, and God, there are guys who think Brock Purdy's the sixth best guy on that offense, but to me, he's the third best at best, probably closer to fifth when you include Trent Williams and all the pass catchers and McCaffrey. But Nick Foles won Super Bowl MVP. Like, we have to remember that. Like, Nick Foles won Super Bowl MVP. So Brock Purdy, who, look, I know he was Mr. Irrelevant. I know it's a wild path. Brock Purdy has been mostly good this year. So it's just hard for me to see any non-quarterback winning unless, again, Travis Kelce can win if he scores 3 touchdowns, but the problem with that is that Mahomes is throwing at least 3. Yeah. So I just don't see unless if it is a Niner skill position player, more likely than not McCaffrey, whose odds are too short anyway, it's hard to find value.
So let's go down that path, Jeff, because that's the guy I wanted to ask you about. Let me say that I'm not feeling this way, obviously. I think the Chiefs are going to win. But if I'm a Niners bettor, right, I think the Niners are going to win this game. Wouldn't it make sense for me to just say, you know what, instead of placing like a money line bet or a against the spread bet on the 49ers, let me just get a Christian McCaffrey at 4.5 to 1 bet in there to win MVP. Because if they win, there's a pretty decent chance that McCaffrey's going to have a significant piece of that game. And I don't find Brock Purdy to be the type of quarterback that will win by default. He'll be treated kind of like a Trent Dilfer was when he was in the Super Bowl. Like I could see McCaffrey being actually the quote-unquote favorite from the 49ers to win as the default answer there. Is that fair?
I can see it. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't know if I agree with that. Again, like we all know, this is the MVP of the Super Bowl is like the fact. Like, okay, so Cooper Kupp a few years ago got it over Stafford, but that was a whole narrative-based thing. So Kupp had the huge year, just capping it off. He scored the game-winning touchdown. Again, I still think Aaron Donald should have won that award, but that's a different argument for a different day.
They put the MVP voting in too early, Jeff. This is a problem with it. If you have something that happens on the final drive, they don't include that.
But that's the thing, though. Like, the way these game flows have gone for San Francisco the last 2 weeks, they've been backwards from what they've been all year.
Yep.
They played horrible first halves. They played really good second halves, coming from 17 down against Detroit. I thought Green Bay was better than them the majority of the game, and then Love obviously lost his mind on the last play. But look, I think the game flow for San Francisco, again, you and I are in the same camp. We both like Kansas City. But I think the game flow is going to dictate if the Niners were to win, they're coming from behind again. And that really leads me to believe that the quarterback's probably going to win the award if the Niners win this game.
I like Christian McCaffrey, so go ahead and take that, Jeff. You know I'm a very good winning sports bettor, so go ahead and play.
I feel pretty good about my small bet on McCaffrey not to score a touchdown now, in all honesty.
You went with McCaffrey not to score a touchdown. You took the no on the bet that everybody that is placing a prop this weekend will have a McCaffrey anytime touchdown bet, and you're over here like, no, what if I place the bet on the no?
Oh, I can't wait to lose that one midway through the first quarter. But, hey, look, it's just such a good price. And, I mean, look, I know he scored essentially in every single game he's played as a 49er. But, look, you got to find some of these where you kind of are like, I really hate this, but the price is too good.
Christian McCaffrey, how many times did he not score a touchdown this year? There were 5 instances of him not scoring a rushing touchdown, and in those games he scored a receiving touchdown in 2 of them. So he had 3 games this year.
So 3 games. Great odds for me.
Hey, never tell him the odds.
Jeff, appreciate the time as always, man. My man, enjoy yourself out there. Try to stay alive until Sunday midday so that way you can at least watch the football game instead of, passing out and being somewhere God only knows where on the strip whenever the game starts. So good luck, my man.
Look, the one advantage I have for me, I have to be on the air at 8:30 on Super Bowl Sunday. So I will be functioning well.
That means nothing. You had to work after I came out there for your bachelor party. That means absolutely nothing.
Well, look, I after that, I didn't work for that whole thing. I probably worked like 2 days in my 14-day stretch. It was a great time, in all honesty.
Yeah, you got to love it.
Yeah, BK, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, man, take it easy. That's Jeff Parles, host of Sports by the Book with the South Point out in Las Vegas. One of my good friends. You can follow him on Twitter at Jeff Parles. He's actually good at the sports betting thing. I'm terrible at it, but if you follow him over there, he talks with people that are running the sports books out in Vegas. He's running in all of those streets out there. So hopefully he made you a little smarter with what he's going to be betting on Sunday. T-Bone, do you have anything in particular? Let me put this out there. This is the game flow that I'm thinking it's going to be. And hopefully this can help you inform, if you care at all, the way that I think the game's going to go. Some of your props. My best guess on how this game will be played, and it's not necessarily like this team wins, this team wins. I think it's going to be a slug of a game in terms of not very many explosives. The Chiefs defense is the #1 defense in the NFL this year at preventing explosive plays. That is how the 49ers like to play. They would prefer to get the explosives, but it's really hard to do against this Chiefs defense. But I think the 49ers are going to be able to move the ball pretty consistently. And then maybe a drive stalls, right? Because it's really hard to move the ball that consistently. I think it's going to be a lot of 8 to 10 play drives. Kind of similar to the Chiefs versus the Bills game that we saw where it ended up being a great first 3 quarters offensively, but there weren't a ton of points that ended up getting scored because the drives were so long. They were sustained. And I think the same thing is going to be true for the Chiefs. When we've seen them score in the postseason, it's been 6, 8, 10, 12 play drives that take like 4, 5, 6 minutes off the clock for the most part. So when that happens, what does it mean? How does that inform any of your prop bets? Well, it means probably an over on Christian McCaffrey stuff. I think it means an over on Isaiah Pacheco rushing attempts. I think it means an over on completions for potentially both quarterbacks. Not necessarily attempts, but high completion percentage, short average depth of target, those kinds of things. So that's what I'm going to be attacking, is more of the completion stuff than the yards. I think there will be fewer yards that are given in the game, but more plays that are run.
And because of that kind of game flow that you're talking about, it's not a player prop, but it's why I like the under as well.
Absolutely.
I don't expect this to be high scoring. Right now, the over-under is set at 47.5, somewhere in that range, depending on where you're looking. I don't expect to see it get to that, because I think you're right. I think it is going to be a little bit slower. I'm kind of torn on whether or not to take the over for Christian McCaffrey. Once you start to get into kind of that 90s range for both a running back and rushing yards and a receiver in 100 or around that mark for receiving as well, I tend to hesitate to stay away from it, if not bet the under, just because you really need to have a big play to kind of get to that, or a massive workload. And if I think the Chiefs are going to be the team that ends up winning this football game, I'm not sure that you're going to see McCaffrey really running a lot in the second half, because I kind of agree with Jeff. I think Kansas City's going to lead early on, and if that's the case, I don't know if you're going to see McCaffrey get a bunch of rushes. I actually like McCaffrey's under on the rushing yards going into this one.
I was just about to pose that question. Do you think Pacheco's carries actually eclipse McCaffrey's in this game? He's received 24 in 2 of the 3 playoff contests, and even
Carries,
against Buffalo.
yes.
Carries.
Touches, no.
Correct.
Yeah, I think Isaiah Pacheco if the Chiefs are in the script that I think they probably will be. I can't speak for you guys, but for myself, I think he's going to get 25 carries in this game. I think that's the way they want to play, because I think that's the way that you keep the ball out of the 49ers' hands offensively, and you find a way to just continue to run at those defensive ends all day long.
He's been right there in 2 of the 3 playoff games, and 4 catches, too, kind of a little under the radar in the last game.
Yeah, he's been getting more and more involved in the passing game over the last 6 weeks or so. Since he's come back from his injury, he's been more involved in the passing game. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You guys can get involved as well on YouTube, youtube.com/101ESPN STL. You got the graveyard over there where they've got the chat going. One's got to go. You give us 4 different options. We'll tell you which one's got to go. That's coming up at 1:30. But next, Josh Hader shed some light yesterday on why he was utilized the way that he was with both the Padres and the Brewers. We'll let you hear that and what it could mean for one reliever for the Cardinals in particular. That's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Blues hockey can be heard exclusively on 101 ESPN. Get the info you need before and after every Blues game with the First Community pre- and post-game show, driven by Clement Ford. And catch every Blues home game from the First Community Terrace.
Bring out the Zamboni!
This is Jay Delsing coming to you from the Car Shields Golf Studios. I hope you'll join me every Sunday morning from 8 to 10 for Golf with Jay Delsing. It's the biggest names in golf, news from the PGA and the LPGA Tours, tips on your golf game, and everything from the world of golf. It's Golf with Jay Delsing, presented by Darty Business Solutions, every Sunday morning from 8 to 10 right here on 101 ESPN.
St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
The arbitration system, and I was with the Brewers. It's not like the Padres put me through that process, but the system told me that the way that any reliever, not even just myself, but any reliever is valued based off saves. And, for me, at the time, I was going multiple innings, going from the 4th inning maybe to the 7th, also doing 2 2/3 save outings. That's where I was like, well, I'm not going to blow my arm out if you're not going to invest in me. So my investment back was, I'll get you the inning, I'll get you the saves, and we'll do everything, but you got to put a team and a bullpen around to do that, right?
So that was Josh Hader talking about the way that he was utilized in the Brewers bullpen and why he decided after the arbitration process to tell the team, hey, screw you guys. I'm not doing that anymore. I will go 1 inning. I will get the saves for you because that is what clearly you guys are rewarding me for via the arbitration system. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. T-Bone, we had our own similar situation with that with Ryan Helsley recently. He goes through the arbitration system, and I'm sure he heard similar stuff from the arbiters that you heard there from Josh Hader. And what did we see? Well, we saw a lot of not going back-to-backs. We saw a lot of him coming exclusively into the 9th inning. Those situations that Josh Hader saw in Milwaukee, we saw that with Ryan Helsley here in St. Louis. I'm sure a lot of people heard that from Hader, and I would imagine the response was something to the effect of, man, that guy's not a team guy. He's clearly just out for himself. He is going out there only doing what he thinks will help his future. And honestly, I have a tough time being able to push back against that because it's 100% true. That's accurate. Like, that would be a correct depiction of the way that Josh Hader presented himself. That being said, man, is it hard to blame him? Like, I can't say that I wouldn't operate the same way if I was him. He knew at the time, hey, I'm one of the best relievers in Major League Baseball. I'm going to make a boatload of money playing this sport. And he looked at his team that he was playing for at the time with the Milwaukee Brewers and knew, how could you not? This team is not going to be the one that pays me. I'm going to get some kind of a payoff down the road, but it will not be from the Brewers. They're not going to spend $20 million a year on a reliever. And so he told them, I want to be utilized this way. I don't want you to ruin my arm. I want to try to stay healthy so I can get to that big payday. T-Bone, isn't that kind of understandable from his perspective? Even though I understand from a fan's perspective, I hear this if I'm a Brewers fan. I'm like, come on, man, really? Really? We might have been able to do something more with you being in a more high-leverage relief role, being willing to come in and pitch multiple innings for me. I'm of two minds here.
Yeah, I kind of am too, because I totally understand the side from Josh Hader, to where when you're a bullpen arm especially, and it is max effort all the time, coming into games, I can totally see where you look at the market for bullpen arms and you go, man, I am one of the best. If I am healthy and I get to free agency, look at the contract he signed. He's going to get a massive contract, which he did from the Houston Astros, compared to like even an 8th inning guy, for example. Like I can't
Devin Williams.
Yeah, Devin Williams now.
While he was there.
Yeah, before he was a closer. Think of like Giovanni Gallegos. Gallegos is never going to get a huge contract. Why? Because he doesn't have the saves. Even though like he's a critical part of any bullpen that he would ever be a part of, because he's the guy that gets you to the closer. But those guys don't get paid. Saves are what pay in Major League Baseball. So I totally get the sense from Josh Hader's perspective of, hey, man, I know I'm in the spot where I'm going to get paid because I am one of the best to do it, and I don't want you guys to be throwing me out there and risking my arm. And let's just be honest, on teams that not sure were ever really viewed as true contenders in the National League. They had good teams, don't get me wrong, but I don't think they were ever viewed as a team that could get to a World Series with the way they were constructed. Now, on the flip side of that, I can totally understand what the Brewers and what fans would be saying.
100%.
Because I can see how that is very frustrating, because we heard even the Cardinals this year say, like, hey, we had some guys that didn't really want to play for the team. Well, that is not playing for the team. And what Josh Hader is saying of, I care more about my free agency. And let's say that was 3 years ago before he even entered, and he's in ARB 1, which is maybe when that happened. I could totally see where that could really kind of rub teammates, fans, management all in the wrong direction, because they are trying to do what's best for the team, and you need to play as a team. And to the defense of the Brewers, for argument's sake here, though what he said was, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to go an inning for a save. But you can get a save in 2 innings. And I understand, like, that is not sustainable to have him do that for.
And that's where he's saying, I don't want to do that because of my arm.
Exactly. And I understand that part to an extent of the Brewers could not rely on Hader to become this magical unicorn that was going to get 6-out saves constantly throughout a baseball season. But could you do it down the stretch? Could you do it? And like, man, the bullpen's kind of burned out a little bit. We really just need this in this one game here in June. And we're not really going to worry about it until we get to October or into August and September in a pennant race. That's where I would kind of counter Josh Hader, because I totally understand his point of, you know, trying to save his arm. And it does, saves do pay. You can get a save if you went 6 outs too as well. So I'm kind of torn on the matter. I actually would probably side more with the front office and fans of saying, man, that would rub me the wrong way, because I'll be honest, that isn't the team player that I think a lot of clubs need, even though he is as good as he is the best closer in baseball. Man, I can see where that could become a massive issue for competitive teams.
So Josh Hader has appeared over the last 3 seasons in 177 games. In those 177 games, do you know how many times he has thrown more than an inning?
177 games, I'll go 10 times.
Bradford, any guesses on how many times in his last 177 appearances, this is dating back to the 2021 season, Josh Hader has appeared for more than 1 inning?
More than 1 inning. Okay, so not quite 2 complete. Anything above 1?
Yeah, 4 outs or more.
Okay, I'll go slightly higher, 14.
0.
What?
Wow.
Not a single time. The last time that he appeared for more than an inning in a regular season game was August 14th of 2020. That was the only time in the 2020 season that he went more than an inning. Before that, it was September of 2019, and that was right after that is when he did the arbitration process. And so since then, he has not gone a single time more than an inning. That is something that I would view as unforgiving. Like, if I'm a team, it would be something that would freak me out in giving him that big-time contract, because as much as I totally understand his perspective, I really do. Last year, Ryan Helsley showed me something in that game where he went in there for the 200th win for Adam Wainwright. That mattered to him. And he said, this is bigger than me. This is something that matters in a serious way for one of my teammates. And I'm willing to put it all on the line for Waino. And I think that you saw in that moment, all right, this is a guy that's here for our team. It's something that I really respected, honestly, about Jordan Hicks, where that dude is willing to go in back-to-back days if you need him to. That dude was willing to go 4 or 5 outs if you needed him to. He would throw whenever it was necessary. I'm not saying you got to have a guy that's willing to do that every time they go out there. That's crazy. And what they had done previously with Josh Hader absolutely probably would have blown his arm out eventually. But him saying I am completely unwilling at any point to go more than an inning, I do think it changes the way that you're able to use your bullpen, and I do think it puts you at a sizable disadvantage. So I understand his perspective. I really do. There's got to be a point in time where you say, you know what? This is one of those days. You go to the skipper, say, hey, I got you for 2 today. I know that we're in a really rough spot with our bullpen. I got you for 2. I can handle what you previously would have had for Devin Williams. Or I can go out there. I know Luis Garcia is going through it right now. He's trying to get himself back on track. I'll get that 8th inning for you today. It's September. We're in the midst of a playoff race. I got it. I'll take the ball. For him to have never done that, not a single time over 3 seasons, I think that tells you everything you need to know.
And don't forget the pennant race this past year, too. Remember the comment that it came out of, wasn't it Bob Melvin said it? Well, now, look, they were probably out of it. They weren't technically out of it. They weren't mathematically out of it, but they were probably out of it. And Hader said, no, I don't want the ball. I mean, that says something, man. I that's why I totally get his perspective of it. And look, I think baseball is not like basketball, for say, where like being a selfish ball handler, for example, can really cause havoc on a team. But when you're in the spot of a closer and you have the best stuff in the game and you kind of aren't willing to go out there and take the ball because you're more worried about getting to free agency, man, that just sits wrong with me.
This goes back to what we said the other day. It was about leadership, but it's a conversation that kind of applies here. Your best reliever's got to be one of the dudes that's willing to take on a role that is different than what you would typically expect. Because when Hader's doing this, it trickles down into your bullpen. Now, the rest of the guys are like, yeah, I have to have this role and that role and that role. And as a coach, you could say, yeah, well, that's Josh Hader. He's different. But does it really change anything? I don't know. Meanwhile, by the way, for what it's worth, Ryan Helsley last year, 11 different appearances of more than an inning. 11. Yeah. 11 times last year he went more than an inning. That's something.
In September alone, we all remember that moment, obviously, against Milwaukee, closing it out for Wainwright. But in September alone, in a 2-week stretch, 3 different occasions on which he went back-to-back days.
The thing that will really be... I'm really going to keep an eye on now. We've heard these comments from Josh Hader. Hey, man, you got your money now. Like, there's no excuse not to do this. If I'm Houston, I'm not saying you push him and you blow out his arm, but there's no reason to have that kind of stretch. What'd you say, 173 games where he didn't go inning plus? There's no more excuse, man. You got paid, and it's now time to be the team player.
Coming up next, let's dive into One's Gotta Go. You give us 4 different options. We'll tell you which one's got to go. 314-399-9646. That is the Air Comfort Service text line. And the YouTube chat is over on youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. 4 options. We'll tell you which one's got to go next here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN. Everywhere you look, that's where we are. On your radio, online, on your mobile device, and in your app store. Search the 101 ESPN app now in the App Store or Google Play. Fast Lane Home, weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. with Anthony Stalter, Jamie Rivers, and Gary Davis on 101 ESPN. Two former pros and one average Joe. The Fast Lane is driven by Scrap Mart Metals Recycling. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Super Sunday creeping closer. I'm Bradford Bruns with your Sports Center update, driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. In roughly 52 hours, Super Bowl 58 will have arrived. The Chiefs and 49ers kicking off at 5:37 p.m. on 101 ESPN. Pregame starts an hour and a half earlier. KC signal caller Patrick Mahomes already making his fourth appearance on this stage. On the other side, San Francisco pursues its first Lombardi trophy since 1994. Hockey, the Blues resume their season tomorrow versus Buffalo. The puck dropping at noon on these airwaves. Tonight across the league, Minnesota hosts Pittsburgh and the Rangers travel to Chicago. The Sports Center update has been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at Londoff.com and LondoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. This is BK and Ferrario. Time now for One's Gotta Go. We offer up the talking points, and you get to pick which one's gotta go on 101 ESPN.
I've been living a lie my entire life. Mike Ryder just made me aware of this. Did you know that St. Louis does not actually have the second biggest Mardi Gras parade in the country?
That can't be true.
According to KSDK, St. Louis is actually like the fourth biggest Mardi Gras parade. Both Pensacola and Mobile, and of course, the whole New Orleans thing, they are all bigger than the St. Louis celebration. I can't believe this.
We've been lied to all along.
I'm flabbergasted. I'm taking it. I couldn't believe this. There are other cities that are known for this, including Galveston, Texas, that may actually be bigger than the St. Louis celebration year by year.
What'd you say?
Right outside of Houston, Galveston, Texas. Right on the coast by Houston.
I can see that. Houston's pretty big. You go there. That makes sense.
No, man. We gotta up our game, St. Louis. Do better. We gotta continue to increase the Mardi Gras celebration. Yeah, Mardi Gras is great. When I was your age, T-Bone, back in the day, I'd go down to Mardi Gras. That's great.
Would you? Yeah, I'm just not big on it, I don't know. I guess I'm hurting the cause here.
You go to a street and you drink while people walk by. What do you mean you're not big
celebrate
on?
something,
Compelling and rich.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for One's Gotta Go. You to give us 4 different options. We'll tell you which one's gotta go here on BK and Ferrario. One's Gotta Go Collector's Edition, T-Bone. An autographed baseball or puck or hot football, autographed memorabilia that way. Autographed card or an autographed jersey. What would you rather have autographed? A ball of that sport, card, or jersey?
This is tough because what I really like, and I have, when I was younger, I got this, a signed Adam Wainwright ball, and then I put it in one of those cases with his rookie card.
Sure.
And I love those. But a jersey would be special. This is tough. I would say get rid of... Oh, man, I'll say get rid of the ball. I'll say you can keep the card. You can still put that up maybe with like a signed jersey. Jersey, you get the frame. It looks awesome like in the man cave. Nobody goes, hey, look, you have a baseball. So I would say get rid of the ball, and that's tough.
I'm getting rid of the card, actually.
That's
and
what
I was a huge collector back in the day, not of Pokemon, mind you, or any of those cards.
The
actual sports. But no, I think it comes
6.
Don't lie. You just quit last year.
Okay, 13.
Renaissance. No, there's...
All right, fine, 31.
There's less surface area. Much less surface area, right? And for me, that matters. The jersey option, the baseball itself, no, those are classic. Give me the classic feels there. I'm going with the card begrudgingly.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for One's Gotta Go. One's Gotta Go sports team with a bird logo. Non-St. Louis edition, though. Ravens, Eagles, Falcons, or Orioles. Ravens, Eagles, Falcons, or Orioles. One's Gotta Go logo edition.
I'm going to get rid of the Falcon logo. I'm not big on the Falcons logo.
Tell Stalter that to his face.
I will when I see him. I luckily I won't see him today because I'll be at Centene. I would say the Falcons logo. I just have never been impressed. I like the Ravens one. I like the Eagles one. I actually really like Baltimore's. So I would say Atlanta.
This is actually a really hard one for me now, simply because my wife is a ridiculous birder. That is an actual term, and she adores the Orioles. So no, the Orioles cannot go whatsoever. I'm going with the Falcons as well. I'm sorry. I like the Ravens and Eagles more.
Easy. The Falcons are clearly fourth on this list. I'm totally with you. Stalter, if you're listening right now, I'm sure you are out there at the Centene Community Ice Center at the E&B Granite Studios. I'm sorry. Your team's logo is clearly inferior to the Ravens, Orioles, and the Eagles. He's going to talk about the Chiefs later today. He's going to talk about George Kittle being better than the Travis Kelce, Mr. Taylor Swift. Unbelievable. Yeah, we're going to go with the Falcons on this one. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. One's got to go. Ryan Helsley, Steven Matz, Lance Lynn, or Kyle Gibson?
Well, Matz and Helsley stay for me. I'll say Kyle Gibson here. I think of those four, Matz has some swing and miss stuff that we don't talk enough about because he's been hurt and in the bullpen. Helsley's got the best stuff of any Cardinals pitcher. At least for Lance Lynn, he has swing and miss, and I've seen him pitch as an above-average pitcher. Most of Kyle Gibson's career, when you look at like ERA plus, has been below league average, and he doesn't have as much swing and miss, so I would say Kyle Gibson's got to go.
This is incredibly vague. It's incredibly broad, and so because of that, I'm actually going to say not based on stuff here, but it's Steven Matz because I want reliability. I want dependability. And for me, I still haven't seen Steven Matz make more than 17 starts in a season for the St. Louis Cardinals. I know I'm going to get that and more, much more from Lynn, Gibson, etc. So Matz has to go.
Yeah, I've got to go with Lance Lynn, the guy that allowed more home runs than anybody else in all of Major League Baseball.
They're going to fix that, though,
I'm sure they will. Kyle Gibson's been pretty good. I think we underestimate
defining good.
The effectiveness of Kyle Gibson. He's an innings eater that goes out there and gives you a chance every time he starts. I don't know if that's always true with Lance Lynn. I like Lance Lynn, the character. I like that he's back in St. Louis. I would prefer it if you had a number 2 starter to go along with him. But if I have to get rid of one of Gibson or Lynn, like if you had told me, hey, BK, you can have that number 2 starter that you want, but you've got to get rid of either Lynn or Gibson at the back end of your rotation, I would probably go with Lance Lynn as the one that I would say, you know what? Okay, we'll put him back in free agency. He can go sign for $11 million elsewhere going into this next season. Coming up next, it's time for our Super Bowl weekend look ahead. What is the singular matchup that you're most looking forward to in this game? And we got to give our final predictions. We'll do that all coming up next as we wrap a bow on BK and Ferrario.
Tomorrow, college basketball is on ESPN. Kansas and Baylor tip off at 5. Your home for the NCAA is 101 ESPN. to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Let's run it back with a daily rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Loom, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
All right, Tim McKernan, clockwork by me. I apologize. So we're going to go quick hitter style for the Super Bowl. T-Bone, the singular matchup that you're most interested in heading into this Super Bowl is what?
I will say it's going to be Nick Bosa versus the tackles, I should say, against the Kansas City Chiefs. Mahomes under pressure. I saw it in the Super Bowl against the Bucs. He may struggle. I think they're going to win that matchup, but I think that's the matchup to watch.
That's a great one. I love the chess match on the sideline specifically. Andy Reid, Kyle Shanahan, not necessarily going mano a mano, but I also love just the way in which the coordinators are going to factor into this one and seeing exactly how exotic and how creative Spags is going to be too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the linebackers versus Christian McCaffrey. The Chiefs linebackers versus Christian McCaffrey. They're going to do everything they can in that matchup that you're talking about, Bradford, to get McCaffrey lined up one-on-one against Nick Bolton. That's going to be their goal for the entire game. I love Nick Bolton. His liability is in pass coverage, and Christian McCaffrey is one of the best pass-catching receiving backs that we have ever seen. T-Bone, when you look at the way that you see this game playing out, your official prediction is what?
I've got the Kansas City Chiefs winning, and I think it's going to be 23-13 is going to be my prediction. I think they blitz them early, and I will take whatever the under is going to be set at for the second half in a live bet, because I think it's going to look a lot like the Baltimore game, where it was quick, boom, it was 14-0, and then it kind of came a slugfest. Baltimore kind of got back into it. It's kind of how I see this one going.
I'm going to give the 49ers a bit more credit offensively. This is not a contest in which field goals are going to remotely enter the equation. Kansas City 28, San Francisco 1 touchdown behind 21.
I've got 23-19. I think it's going to be a really close game throughout. Yeah, a lot of field goals. I told you earlier, I think it's going to be one of those things where drives go 6, 8, 10, 12 plays, and then they stall out once you get into the red zone. So I think you're going to see a bunch of field goals in this game. 23-19, my final score. Chiefs end up coming out on top in a game that nobody really enjoyed watching as much as we were hoping to. I've got the under. I've got, if you want to bet on MVP, only bet on Patrick Mahomes. But if you're going on the 49ers side of things, I do think Christian McCaffrey is a really good bet over there as well, as I mentioned earlier today. Take unders on all kinds of props except for like passing completions. Those are the kinds of things that I would take the overs for. All right, coming up next is the Fast Lane. But before we get to them, 101 ESPN has your chance right now to win a single session pair of tickets to see the 2024 State Farm's Missouri Valley Conference men's basketball tournament. It's the return of Arch Madness. It's coming up March 7th through the 10th at Enterprise Center, and 314-399-9646 is the place where you can text right now. If you have the correct answer to Tanner's batting leadoff option, the original guy that he would bat leadoff in his fantasy baseball lineup that we put together earlier today, if you've got the correct answer to that, your text number 101, you are getting the pair of passes to see the MVC tournament March 7th through the 10th at Enterprise Center. For T-Bone and Bradford, who, by the way, came in late, pinch hitting. Great job. Good work today on the board. I'm Brandon Kiley. Enjoy the Super Bowl on Sunday. We'll talk to you guys on Monday at 11 a.m. here on 101 ESPN.
Someone's got to say it. Let it be you. Use the mic drop feature in the 101 ESPN app. Search the 101 ESPN app now in the App Store or Google Play.